Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. I hope we've all cleared our schedules between 2020 and 2025 because, 5 more Avatar movies, or 4 more anyway, on the way with dates announced because that's going to happen. Sure thing, James Cameron. I believe you this time.
how many? I mean, he's going to have to find five more. Five more, you said, right? Five more?
I don't know. I think it's 4. I don't know. The dates
Four
were
more.
between
Let's say
2020 and
four.
2025.
So that's got to be four.
4 more. He's filming
Four
them all at the
more
same time.
Kevin Costner movies to rip off,
That's right.
Which were rip-offs of previous movies, if I remember
That's
correctly.
right. Yeah.
Dances with Wolves wasn't an original. It was a spiritual remake of something I can't remember because I don't care.
They're all Fern Gully.
I'm pretty sure Fern Gully is a ripoff of some of those other things, too.
Of course it is.
Okay. I don't like the placement of my microphone right now. I'm having some issues with that.
All right.
I did complain about having shirts last week, so I went and bought some shirts this weekend.
I thought you had a bunch that you just, didn't wear on camera.
I know, and I still am not wearing this is one of my old shirts. This is still just
You just like to buy t-shirts. That's what it is.
I do love to buy. These were not t-shirts. These were workout shirts. Anyways, we also, my wife's like, oh, let's go see how many points we've got on our card. Do you want to redeem these points for cash? I'm like, yeah, I do. She goes, what are we going to do with this cash? I said, I need a bike. She goes, you do need a bike. Like, jeez. Boy, honey, you just said the wrong words. So I bought a bike.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I have not owned a bike since I was in...
Now, you're talking motorcycle or bicycle?
No, bicycle. Yes, I have a motorcycle. Well, my wife has a motorcycle, but I have a now bicycle. She's had a bicycle
so
for
you are now both a biker and a cyclist. You see how that
yes.
works?
So, yes. So I did not want a mountain bike because I live in Florida and there's no such thing as a mountain here.
Okay.
I did not want a cheap Walmart bike that is just going to fall apart on me anyways and it's going to weigh 100,000 pounds. So my thought process is this. This is the last bike I'm ever going to buy unless I get really into biking, and then it will be the first of many progressively more expensive bikes until my wife throws me out of the house. Because I went to a bike shop and I walked into a section and I was like, oh, $399 seems pretty... Oh, $13.99. Oh, $43.99. Okay, I'm sorry. I misread that.
Carbon fiber or something?
Oh yeah, carbon fiber, the whole unicorn horn stump stuff. It was crazy. I'm like, I mean, it didn't weigh anything. It was ridiculously light, and I'm sure it was great. But holy moly, those things are expensive. So I got a road bike. A real road bike to go on real roads, and there's a St. Pete cycling club here that goes out every couple times a week and go cycling. And I understand the geriatrics will probably be a lot faster than I will be, but I will travel with the geriatrics until I earn my way up. And true to form, I did not buy the spandex that comes along with many people buying the bike. You buy the bike, you earn the spandex. So I have not earned it yet. I will tell you this, my butt hurts like a lot. Those seats are not meant to be sat upon.
That's why people wear the bike shorts that have padding built in, because apparently you can't put the padding on the seat, which would seem like a logical place for us non-cyclists, but what do I know? So
yeah, well, I don't know. All I know is I have an uncle who's really into cycling. He cycles across states all the time, and he said, yeah, you got to try out all the seats, you got to get the cycling shorts with the pads in them, and in the end it's not going to make any difference. You're going to have to toughen up your bottom. I'm like,
there you go.
I'm sorry, are you talking about calluses on my bottom? Is that what you're talking about? He's like, well, it's not really a callus. You just get used to it. I'm like, I don't know about this. Anyways, so I cycled. I am now a cyclist. So my wife says every time you cycle, you can take the number of times you cycle and divide that into the price of the bike. So you've ridden it. Yeah, you've ridden it once, or twice now. It's half price. 3 times, third price. So how long until I got my money's worth? She goes, when you get into the cents. I'm like, I'll be riding this thing for the rest of my life. Anyway, so that was my big weekend this weekend, and why I didn't get anything done other than complain about my bottom and buy a bike, apparently. But this is not a cycling podcast. This is the AVRant Podcast. In this podcast, we talk about your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Contact us at www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast, where we are often active. Our YouTube channel, where your podcast question will be answered in video form, so you can see all of my funny expressions and maybe me ducking out to get a glass of water during Rob answering at length your question. YouTube.com/C/AVRant. Contact us directly. It's Rob at AVRant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. It's Tom at AVRant.com. My Twitter is at AVRent_Tom. Our producer, his name is Austin. Austin puts together all our videos, helps put together the question list, and you can find Austin at Austin, TEN, Pond. He has his own podcast, We Watch Movies Podcast. It's a podcast about which are the most worthwhile survey/contest to enter on grocery receipts. You know, you go to the grocery store and they give you like an extra long receipt. They say, fill out this and you could possibly win $10 million or whatever it is. That's what his podcast is about. It's the We Watch Movies podcast about grocery receipt contest viability.
Useful.
It is. I think it's very useful. It's very good. Very good. Check that out. Yeah. Or don't. It doesn't. It's really not very. Doesn't. I mean it. The last one was about the Piggly Wiggly. I don't even have a Piggly Wiggly near me. I mean, what are you gonna do? You live in Canada. I mean, it's not like they're not Canadian. You know, they're doing it in Texas. But apparently, Piggly Wigglies are a thing.
Okay.
It's a weird thing.
We watch movies.
We watch movies. All right. So I always like to start off thanking our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is by going to www.avrant.com and click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link. There you will be led to a PayPal donation page where PayPal will take your PayPal account information or your credit card, take your money, skim a little bit off the top for themselves, and give the rest to us. Mm-hmm. That will go into our coffers to help pay for our podcast hosting fees and other such things. Shipping for things, I suppose. Occasional pieces of gear and or software. So we want to thank Nate and Matt for being our listeners of the week. They did go do that, and they did donate to the podcast, and we do thank them. Thank you, Nate, and thank you, Matt.
Nate, Matt, thank you very much both for those donations.
I kind of feel like I should put Matt before Nate because of alphabetical order, but whatever, we're not doing that. Let's get into the news here. Mm-hmm. Oppo launched their UDP 205 Ultra HD Blu-ray player for 1,300 smackaroos. They call it their audiophile model with 7.1 analog audio outputs using ESS Saber Pro DACs, dedicated 2-channel XLR audio outputs, and a toroidal, well, I hate saying that word, power supply dedicated to the analog sections of the player. You can still send audio via HDMI as a bit stream for Atmos and DTS-X support. And the future firmware update will add Dolby Vision support. So for those of you that are still, you know, rocking you want that ultimate in DACs and audio stuff and all of that, this is the player.
Analog audio, to be specific, because if you're sending the bitstream out in order to make use of immersive audio, Dolby Atmos or DTS-X, this ain't doing anything.
No,
you know, that the 203 doesn't already do. So
right.
This is about only
if you're
audio.
Analog. Yeah. And this is just like the Blu-ray player was the same way. And I got no problems with it. They're offering this for a very specific subset of customers, and they've honestly already got the stuff lying around. Right, they've got their headphone amp, which has all this stuff in it.
Yeah, that's another. It does have an upgraded headphone amplifier built into it as well, compared to the 203.
So, I mean, basically, you're getting the Blu-ray plus the headphone amp stuff all in the same section, which is nice, I suppose. How useful is it? If you have to ask, it ain't for you. Save your money and buy the other one. Honestly, it really isn't, and they will tell you the same thing. They will tell you the same thing. Believe me, they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes or confuse you or anything like that. They are not. So 2016, 2017 Yamaha AV receivers are getting Dolby Vision HDL support right now with the latest firmware update. So if you haven't updated your Yamaha recently and you have a 2016 or 2017, now's the time to do it. This update is also adding support for Tidal and Deezer. I don't know that I've heard of Deezer.
Yeah, that's an older one. So
is it really?
I remember, yeah.
Kind of slipped under my radar. You know, I can only pay attention to so many things. Anyways, those are streaming music, I guess, services. Sorry. And those will go to the Yamaha Music Cast whole house audio system. So
Yeah, Tidal in particular, like people were pointing out,
yeah.
Sonos and Denon Hios, they both supported Tidal already. That was one service that was lacking from Yamaha, but now they've added it. And yeah, so they're the first AV receiver manufacturer to issue their firmware update to add Dolby Vision support, and they've got HLG, the hybrid log gamma, in there as well. So they're ready to go. So good on them. And I'm sure everyone is following soon, very soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bad news is it looks like the farthest back they're going are 2016 models. There's really no technical reason why the 2015 models couldn't also support these HDR formats, but they're just not doing it. Yeah.
Samsung's royalty-free HDR10 Plus format, which adds dynamic metadata for scene-by-scene or frame-by-frame HDR instructions, has one content partner now. Before it had 0, so it's 100% better than that. And that content partner is Amazon.
Infinity% better, yes. Amazon,
I mean,
yes, they're on board.
Yeah. So Samsung's 2017 HDR TVs already have the HDR10 Plus decoding ready to go, and the 2016 models will get it via a firmware update. No other brands or content partners have been announced as of yet, but keep your eyes open for that one. Samsung's going to do it. Other people are going to do it. It's not going to be just Samsung.
I mean, being royalty free, there isn't the hurdle of a cost other than the cost of developing whatever software or firmware patch needs to be done.
Yeah.
I suppose there's some cost there, but the thing itself, they don't need to pay any extra for.
Yeah, and according to tech journalist Petri,
Petri Titanen.
Yeah, whatever. HDR10 Plus. I mean, whenever I do that to your name, believe me, it's not because I am inconsiderate or in any way degrading you as a person for having a hard to say name. I am mad at myself for being unable to pronounce what are letters that I all recognize and have seen in a configuration at least similar to yours, and still look at it and go, nope, it's not coming out. So I'm sorry, Petri. Sorry about that, too. Anyway, HDR10 Plus only works for built-in streaming apps right now. If any external sources want to use it, it will require HDMI 2.1 and an addendum to the Ultra HD Blu-ray spec.
You know, for all those HDMI 2.1 devices out there.
The zero
the
of them?
zero right
zero
at this moment. Yeah, so do we need another HDR format? Can we just...
Yeah, I mean, obviously we do. We have to have another one. The question is, do we really need another HDMI spec at all? You know, I mean, can't we just...
You do if you're going to do 8K, so that's
firmware update it someplace.
Yeah.
But Emotiva is now offering free shipping to Canada and full repair. Now they're no longer holding sales, and full repair service at their Tennessee facility is now available to Canadians. But you guys still got to ship it across international lines, right?
Yeah. But at least when you first buy it, free shipping to Canada now. So good. US and Canada, free shipping. Good news.
There we go. All right, some comments here from our listeners. We have a ridiculous number of questions. I'm dismaying on my part. Number of questions. I'll be shocked to see how many questions. So we're going to try to power through this as fast as we can. So if I talk fast, that's because of you people. Antoine on Twitter heard us mention Mica speakers last week and how we didn't know anything about the brand. He says that the current darling, that's in air quotes, on Reddit for some reason, so they're getting a whole bunch of attention that way. Now I actively hate Mica. I'm sorry.
You know, I've seen some quite good information and advice on Reddit. I've also seen some horrible and incredibly misinformed advice. So it's a mixed bag over there on Reddit.
It's not because of Reddit that I'm saying I like it. Anything that's hot, like super duper hot, that's getting a lot of press because it's being talked up on like forums. I don't care if it's Reddit or Audioholics or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. AVS doesn't matter. What happens is people go crazy for this stuff. And then it's like the cure to cancer for a while, and then somebody with a head on their shoulders gets a hold of them and go, I don't know, they're all right. I mean, for the price, they're reasonable. I think they're a pretty good deal. Yeah. They're a pretty good deal. That's what it's going to end up being.
Yep.
So, and you know what? You know what's also a pretty good deal? All the other speakers that we recommend on this podcast. So therefore, all these people are like, they're the best thing since God made the first sound by punching the devil in the face or something. I don't know. That went way off kilter there. But they're not that good. They're just going to be okay. You can look at the price and you go, yeah, I would spend that for that sound. which probably means they're really quite not as good as everybody's saying they are. Bill had the Denon AVR X6300H that was producing a clearly audible hiss/buzz from all of his speakers. We said to give Denon a chance to repair it. He sent it to their local repair shop partner company who claimed they couldn't replicate the problem because they didn't plug it in because they are jerks. I said that last part, and it's probably true. But Bill had an audio recording of the noise, and by emailing Denon's service manager when above their heads, he was able to get the issue fixed. That's right, buddy. Over your head. I got the proof. I got the screen caps. I'm good to go. The service manager recognized the issue as soon as he heard it, and he had the repair shop replace a certain part, but they didn't tell Bill what that part was. So Bill had to pay $80 in one-way shipping charges, but the rest of the costs were covered. Best of all, his X6300H is nearly silent now. With 3 speakers connected, it's dead silent no matter how close he puts his ear to the speakers. And with all 11 speakers connected, there's the smallest hiss with his ear right up next to the speaker, but it's completely silent at all his seats, so he doesn't feel any need for a separate amp now. And overall, he's very happy with the outcome. Yeah, dude. So repair facilities that those third-party repair facilities, this is not an uncommon thing, dude. Those dudes straight up don't want to do any work. They are perfectly happy to like say, Jenna, we looked at it, nothing was wrong with it, and send it back to you. They're perfectly happy to do that. I believe that because I think they still get paid something. That's my thought. I don't know if it's true or not, but that's my thought. They get paid something. And that's something that they get paid. They're like, yep, all we got to do is sign this paper, ship it back. Nobody does nothing in here. Don't even open that box. Cut the tape, then retape it and send it back. You should put like Kathy Bates in Misery when she was like putting hairs across, taping hairs to things so that if you opened a book or opened a door, it would break the hair. You should do that so that you know whether or not they actually opened that box and took a look at something. You know, like tape a couple of, or like somehow affix a couple of hairs someplace or a little string someplace so that if they were to open the case of the Denon, you would know. You should do that next time. Anyway,
yeah,
and everybody
did the right thing here. He persisted. He didn't get like upset and give up and say nuts to this and down with Denon or any. He's like, nope, he figured out. You get in touch with the right person. This person knew exactly what the problem was right away and got it fixed. So I wouldn't blame anybody who would have gotten upset and might have given up. That is completely understandable. But Bill, kudos to you. It sucks that you're out $80 for some shipping costs because this is an expensive, big, heavy thing to ship. So that's why it costs that much. But ultimately worth it because, I mean, hey, he was thinking of buying a complete separate amp. That's going to be more than $80. So in the end, great. And it's impressive that this thing can drive 11 speakers all by itself. And that's exactly the type of thing I was talking about. You connect more speakers, you get a little bit higher noise floor. But this is impressively low based on what Bill was saying. So yeah, all around good outcome and good job, Bill.
Tom, not me, different guy, received a pair of Ascenda Acoustic Sierra Luna satellite speakers. These are like little bookshelf speakers with a front slided port. He had intended to use them as surrounds in his theater, but they sound so good, and he says every bit as good as his Sierra 2s, that he's decided to use them in his office instead, along with an Emotiva Bass Axe, a 100 amp and a Bass Axe S8 subwoofer. He thinks there's some kind of voodoo going on because the little 4.5-inch mid-range driver manages to put out an astonishing amount of bass. Now, these are in his office, and I don't know if are you showing pictures of these things?
I am. I'm showing the pictures.
You can see how close he's sitting to them, and this is a very good example of why you do not need very big speakers if you are going to sit very close to something.
That's right.
Sitting very close to these things and saying they sound just as good as the Sierra 2s, that doesn't exactly shock me, because you're sitting much further away from your Sierra 2s, and they have to fill a much bigger space. So I would first of all, I would expect these to sound similar because they're meant to match the Sierra.
And it's an identical tweeter.
Number one, you're sitting awfully close. Yeah, close. So really good. I'm glad you like them.
Yeah, that's a nice first impression to hear. That's exactly what we want to hear.
Yeah, it's got that subwoofer kind of weirdly placed, but whatever. Against the wall, like it did something wrong. It's like it's in the Blair Witch Project over there, like standing in the corner. Like, you get in the corner where the Blair Witch gets you. All right. Let's get into these questions here. Let's start with Steve. Steve says he has a 35-foot long HDMI cable inside his walls. He does not have a 4K HDR display or sources yet. So he'd like to know if there's any way for him to test his current HDMI cable and see if it can pass 18 gigabits per second. If it can't, he'll need to cut into his walls to replace the HDMI cable, and that will in turn impact his projector upgrade decision. So how can he test his current HDMI cable? Now, that's a hard one.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the equipment, which the last time I knew of anybody using this type of equipment to test these kinds of cables with these kinds of lobes, they took the cables to Monster Cable and used their equipment there.
Oh, right, yeah.
That's what Clint did one time, which was
not an option in this case.
Not really an option. And those devices cost millions of dollars or whatever. I don't know, a lot. So if you bought your cable from Blue Jeans Cable, you can just ask them. Okay.
If that's the case, Blue Jeans will tell you that their cables up to 25 feet in length have been fully HDMI high-speed premium certified, which means they're guaranteed to do the 18 gigabits per second. But this is a 35-foot long. Even Blue Jeans haven't been certified for 35 feet long. So they will tell you that technically, if it's theirs, it's not. But if it's some other brand, then we definitely don't know. Not for certain.
We won't know for certain.
If it's rated for high speed, there's a half decent chance. But I just want to talk a little bit about the signal first, because to get over the 10.2 gigabits per second, that any cable that was fully certified high speed will definitely pass 10.2 gigabits per second. And in order to exceed that, you'd need to be sending 4K resolution at 60 frames a second with 10-bit color. That would do it. That would get you over the 10.2. If you're going to be sending 4K resolution at 24 or 30 frames per second at 10-bit color, you're not going to exceed 10.2 gigabits per second, so you're safe, as long as your cable was certified high speed. So just on the signal side, realize that you might be fine with just high speed regardless, and then if you are going to be sending 60 frames per second, that's what you would actually need to try to send in order to test whether you need more than 10.2.
Right. So the reality here is it probably will be, if it's high speed, it will probably be okay.
Right.
For most of your Ultra HD Blu-ray stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because originally they were saying you weren't supposed to need any new cables as long as you had high speed, but then some people were like, but the Panasonic Blu-ray players output 12-bit at 60 frames, and these high-speed cables sometimes aren't passing that.
Right.
So
35. Your problem here really is 35 feet. Is what it comes down to.
That's right.
If you had a 25-foot run in there, probably be a lot safer, but you don't. So if you're budgeting right now for your projector, I would go ahead and budget for a cable and the installation.
I mean, to test this, you'd either have to borrow some equipment. I mean, you could go to haul it around it. You could go to your local Best. Well, I mean, all you need is a small 4K display, because it just has to be a display that can accept 4K at 60 frames per second. That's all with 10-bit. So you could go to your local Best Buy and see if they have some open box stuff that they'd be okay with you buying and then returning. Because, I mean, they have a good return policy at Best Buy. And if it's already open box, then you're not really putting them out any additional money. So I wouldn't feel too guilty. So you grab yourself an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. You grab yourself a small 4K display, and you could test it that way. The only other way would be to hire somebody who has the equipment that could bring said equipment and do it for you, which would be more expensive than just buying some stuff and returning it.
Which would essentially be free, except for maybe a restocking charge. So
that's
you would
right.
Look into that.
Yeah, so I mean that would be my suggestion, because you have to send a signal, and there has to be something on the other end for that signal to go to test this. That's the only way to do it.
Yeah, you want to spend a little while looking at it too, because while it's unlikely, it's generally either all or nothing. Either it comes through, or it doesn't. There is the chance that there's going to be a little bit of signal loss, and you might get like sparkles in like the dark areas and stuff. So you're going to want to watch for a little bit and make sure that you're getting everything through. And of course, don't buy like the world's cheapest everything to test the stuff out on. And you're going to have to get something that can actually pass and receive the signal as you intend it to be
Yeah.
used in your home theater.
Yeah, a good source to try would be the Ultra HD Blu-ray of Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk, because
Oh
that
God,
is
yeah.
4K at 60 frames per second, 10-bit color. So that would exceed 10.2 gigabits per second.
And everything I've heard about that movie makes me think it's just a film about somebody walking during
No,
halftime.
it's a
It's
war
just,
movie, but
I know, but it's not. It's not said to be a very good movie. It's just technically very exciting. All right, Greg. This comes from Facebook. Greg is asking, he says, on behalf of a friend. The friend is putting in surround sound setup in his new basement construction, but the aesthetics committee said that the only acceptable speaker placement is all 7 speakers in the ceiling.
all right.
I do not accept this. I gotta believe that we can
Maybe do in-wall fronts.
yeah, maybe just have some little conversations here about in-wall designs. It's a basement.
Yeah.
It's new.
Because if the speakers are in the wall and they're painted to match the
Yeah.
same color as the wall, I mean, you're barely gonna see that.
Not gonna be bad at all. Look at those Kef speakers. They're pretty. Like the on-wall ones. Those are pretty. The little thin silver
The T
looking.
series, the super
Yeah.
skinnies.
You know, look
But
at
I mean,
those.
I'm thinking if the idea is to not see speakers at all, in
Yeah. Oh yeah, I
walls
agree
with
completely.
in walls with paintable grills, which most of them are. That's pretty darn invisible, and it gets you much better placement. Certainly, at least for your front 3. I'm fine with using in ceilings for your surround and surround backs. It's not ideal, but if that's what you got to do, I'm fine with that. But the front 3, if you can make them in wall instead of in ceiling, that'd be the way to go. But let's answer the question as is and move up. We've said our piece.
But seriously, show her some pictures of some stuff. All right, the receiver will be a Denon X2300W or X3300W. So first of all, should things be set up and configured as 7.1 or 5.1.2?
How much space do you have behind your seats?
I know, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah. How big is this room, dude? Because that's going to answer the question a lot more than what we're going to answer. So if it's a big room, you can do 7.2, not 7.1. But let's go with that. Or if it's a smaller room, you can do 5.1.2. So there you go.
Yeah, if you have 4 feet of space behind your seat, I'd say go for 7.1. If you have less than 4 feet of space behind your seat, I'd say set it up as 5.1.2.
Yeah. So it says the budget for all 7 in-ceiling speakers is $600.
Okay.
So receiver and subwoofer budget are separate, so don't worry about that. Greg was thinking it would be nice to at least use the angled type of in-ceiling speakers for the front 3, but within his budget, he isn't sure what brands and models are the best choice. Given these restrictions, what speakers would we recommend, and would we suggest different models for the front 3 versus the surrounds? Since you're going for inexpensive speakers anyways, because $600 for 7 speakers,
right?
I mean,
less than $100 a piece, obviously.
That's inexpensive. I would not recommend going with different brands if you can get away with it. You might as well try to match them as best you can.
But he was saying different models, so he could get the angled type for the front 3 and straight down firing for the surrounds and surround backs,
and that would be fine.
That's what I would recommend. Your surround and surround backs, have them be the regular straight downward firing, as well. If it's going to be 5.1.2, make the Atmos speakers straight downward firing. They're supposed to be. But yeah, if you must place the front 3 in the ceiling, then absolutely go for the ones that are angled. And I'm going to suggest some company that we mentioned last week, which is Outdoor Speaker Depot. Their MK series of in-ceiling speakers have a nice aluminum dome tweeter, and they use a Kevlar woofer or aramid fiber. Although, you know what, they say Kevlar, they probably licensed the actual Kevlar brand because they're still using
I thought that Kevlar didn't want them to do that anymore.
No, as long as you license it, it's fine. They just don't want you calling it generic.
It doesn't have the little TM after it. That should
maybe then they can call it aramid fiber, but same stuff. MK series. So they got the 670s, MK 670s, which are the angled version, and the MK 650s, which are the straight down firing version. And in both cases, they actually mention on their website they recommend a back enclosure that is 3 cubic feet in volume. So I was like, hey, there it is, right there. 3 cubic feet in volume. That's your back enclosure. You can make your own or buy their metal ones that they sell.
The angled ones are out of stock.
Yeah, they're out of stock, but they exist. So there's another boat coming. They'll be there.
Yeah, really. Yeah, no doubt. All right. Yeah, I can get behind that. It really doesn't matter at this price point. to be honest with you, as long as they're not those mica speakers, which are totally over.
Oh, come on, man. They might be fine. They might be really good. They look, you know what? The mica speakers look an awful lot like Bic.
Yeah, they probably are.
Wouldn't shock me if it's the same OEM.
And then, you know what? That doesn't bother me at all either. The only difference when you get into OEM stuff, the only problems that you can run into if you're like, oh, that's just a rebadged whatever, right? That's just a rebadged this. The only problem you get into when you rebadge something is whether or not the quality control is the same on both for both brands. You know, because a lot of times when it's like, we'll take all the ones you don't want, and anything we don't want, we'll sell to these other people. So you're getting like the ones that weren't up to, let's say, Bic's exacting standards, going to sort of Micah, go to somebody else, and or something like that. Who knows? I don't know. You don't know. So, and we don't even know if they're rebadged. So I'm just saying, anything that meets your price point that has fairly decent reviews on whatever website, as long as it's not their own website, I would do a little bit of searching. I would be okay with. Mark's a bit divided about having replaced his NHT Super Zero speaker setup with an RBH impression series. Wow, I messed up RBH. Like, I think I deserve 3 lashes for that one. On the plus side, the impression series are beautiful, and there's no issue in terms of spouse acceptance factor. They can play a bit louder and a bit lower, but he can't use a center speaker because it's too physically wide for his available space. On the negatives, he doesn't think there's that much of improvement versus his NHT Super Zeros plus a sub, and the RBHs actually seem to have a bit more roll-off in the highs than the NHTs. Furthermore, had in his mind that he wanted to listen to 2-channel stereo in direct mode. He has an Emotiva UMC1 processor. He's been looking forward to using the tower speakers with the Emotiva in direct mode for stereo. When he tried it out, he heard distortion. And when we switched it back to just stereo listening mode, the distortion went away. So is all this normal? Was he expecting too much from the RBH towers, or is there maybe something defective with his pair?
So I want to say that overall, what you're describing is pretty normal.
Yeah,
the only thing that's giving me pause is that mention of the distortion. So the RBH towers, the Impression Series towers, they can play crazy loud. You're probably not anywhere close to how loud they can actually play.
Right,
but they don't play that low, which is actually a reason I like them. Because I'm like, no matter what your speakers are, you ought to be crossing them over to subwoofers. We'll get into your whole 2-channel and direct thing in a second. But yeah, overall, what you're describing is kind of normal because the NHT Super Zeros are really darn good speakers. Right? The one drawback they have is that they're small, they're sealed, and therefore they can't play exceedingly loud.
Right.
But otherwise, they're darn good, which is why I've been recommending them for years and years and years. Tom's been recommending them even longer than I have. So,
and the reason why, I mean, you can almost, this is a good example of when you can look at your reviewer and say, okay, what is this reviewer like? And so when they say they like something and they also like another thing, what am I expecting things to be completely different?
Yeah, they're probably not worlds apart, right? Yeah.
Right. And that's what you're finding right here. I like the RBH impression series. I also like the NHT Super Zeros. Now, in the right room, either one makes sense. And I don't know, did he ask us about this upgrade before he did it?
Yeah. Except I think we answered it when you were away, so it was Lee and myself. I think that was one of the times. But I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
No, he was just saying he had a budget. He wanted to upgrade his NHTs. He wanted something that could play louder and lower. I was like, well, RBH Impression Series fits that bill. And it's not as though what he's saying is, far away from that. He's just like, oh, it's not actually that big of an upgrade. But he's mentioning it was like NHT Super Zeros with a subwoofer versus the RBH towers without a subwoofer. And that's a pretty big deal.
That is a big deal. So, I mean, if I had been part of that conversation, I would have said, this is going to be a more, you're getting what you want, which is lower and louder. But you're not going to see that there's a huge amount of difference between the upper end. It's easy for me to say that now that you've already said it. So I won't take any credit for that. But Rob's absolutely right. You cannot compare the apples of NHT and a sub to the oranges of the Impression Series by themselves. They're not meant to play. They can play lower. They can.
Yeah, they can play lower than the Super Zeros. But
they're still not a subwoofer.
For the size of them, they have surprisingly little deep bass, which I am a fan of. They use all of that driver area to go loud rather than low. And I'm a fan of that design choice, but not everybody is.
Yeah. Now, to go into now that being said, okay, so now you've got these speakers, so you're not, you're kind of questioning whether or not you love them, and I can understand that. The sort
Mm-hmm.
of buyer's remorse thing that you have going on right now, I can completely understand. I made the mistake of Googling the bicycle I bought this weekend after I bought it.
Jeez,
Okay.
you don't follow
Okay.
your own advice.
I as I was doing it, I was like, "You shouldn't be doing this, Tom.
Do as
You
I
shouldn't
say,
be
not as
doing
I
this."
do.
No, it's not true. It's not true. And I was not displeased with what I saw.
Hmm.
I was not displeased with what I saw. And in the end, it didn't really matter because me buying a bicycle, which I haven't ridden a bicycle since the last time I rode one, it had to be 20 years ago. 20 years ago was the last time I physically got on a bicycle for any length of time. And before it was another 10 years before that, was the last time I owned one. I wasn't gonna be able to tell the difference between one and another. I just went with the one that felt the best for me and seemed to ride the best for me, and was the one I liked the best out of the 3 that were available in my price range, or 4 that were available in my price range in town. And I'm not buying something online that I can't ride before I do it, right? Here is the same sort of situation. You went on the advice of others. You asked, you were looking for some changes.
Mm-hmm.
I knew only the few parameters I wanted in the bike. I wanted the road bike. I didn't want this. I didn't want that. You wanted louder and lower. You got louder and lower. Then you're like, but there's no change to the top end. I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised. There isn't going to be that much of a change because RBHs are very flat. They try to be flat. They try to be neutral. And then NHT Super Zeros try to be flat and they try to be neutral. I can rattle off 5 other speakers that you could put in that same room and be like, they all kind of sound the same. Like, I know.
Yep.
That's great, isn't it? But RBHs are great because they are able to fill up a much bigger space. Do you need that? I don't know. But here we are, where this was the situation. The problem that really comes in is that you're trying to use the RBHs without a sub.
Yeah. This
and
whole idea of wanting to do 2-channel stereo in direct mode, just running the front towers full range. I would like to relieve you of that idea, is how I will put it. Believe me.
Sounds like you're gonna slice it out of his head. If you were Hannibal Lecter, that would be very ominous, what you just said.
That's right. I know.
Let me relieve you of this temporal lobe that you have.
This is something that we talk an awful lot about on this podcast because you are so not alone, Mark.
No, you're not.
In fact, maybe this idea, got into your head because you've been reading a whole bunch of other people's opinions who have it in mind that the ideal, and you know what? You could have been reading stuff that Andrew Jones said because he said stuff like this. The ideal is somehow full range speakers, no subwoofer necessary, that is somehow the best way that you could experience 2-channel sound, or surround sound for that matter. Some people have said that. That is something that Tom and I completely disagree with, because you are not listening outside and you are not listening in an anechoic chamber. You are listening inside a room, which means that bass sound waves, there is no way to avoid this when you have walls anywhere within 55 feet of you in any direction. There is no way to avoid sound waves in the bass that bounced between one or more walls before they ever reached your ears. You never hear the direct sound on those very low frequencies. Never. You only ever hear reflected sound when you have walls around you. And because of that, the placement of the things that create the bass, which we would use subwoofers to do that, is different from the ideal placement where your mid-range and treble should be coming from. So we strongly suggest always using subwoofers, at least a pair, quads if you can, but a pair of subwoofers can be great. But setting them up in your room so that you have nice, uniform, even, linear bass, and then you cross it over to some very nice speakers that can handle the mid-range and treble, which it sounds like this one thing about saying that when you played them full range there was distortion, that gives me some pause. Because
he's not telling me where the distortion is. If it's in the low end,
if it's in the really low bass, like if he was like, I got some big towers, because they are big. Those RBHs are big. He's like, I got some big towers. I'm gonna put on some thumping bass, and that's what caused the distortion. Then I don't think there's anything wrong, because they will. Much like Kef's towers. If you try to make them play crazy low bass, they'll try to play it, but they'll distort when they do it. If that's what it was super loud, low thumping bass, and that caused the distortion, then I'm not worried. And it sounds like
screeching in the high end, though. I'm like,
but he didn't describe that. And since he says once he put it in stereo mode and his subs were back in, all that distortion went away. It's really making me think the distortion was in the low bass.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you want to have a two-channel listening experience, just remember that the subwoofers are part of that. I don't care. First of all, you don't have full range speakers. Not only
Right.
that,
Right.
all you people listening to this podcast do not have full range speakers. The couple of you who are like, "Hey, I do," you might, but most of you who, even the ones who say, "I do," they're big. No, big is not it. Full range is 20 to 20,
Yep.
20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. If your towers are not hitting 20 hertz, you don't have full range speakers by definition.
And if you're just finding it hard to get your head around, if you're saying, I still think that all the sound should come from one source, right? Because sometimes that's what it is, right? They're just like, all the sound creating things should be in one cabinet. That's the only way I can get my head around it. Do you have a problem with having both a tweeter and a woofer in your speaker? Do you have a problem with
Yeah.
that? Because almost everyone would say no, of course. Every speaker that's a bookshelf or larger is going to have at least one tweeter and one woofer for the most part.
This is an audiophile crap speaker. It doesn't
There's
smell like crap.
there's effectively no difference between, well, now you've just added another driver. And you have the freedom to place this other driver that's producing nothing but low frequencies where you only ever hear reflected sound. You have the freedom to place that someplace else in your room, which we say is a fantastic thing. But if what you're having trouble with is wrapping your mind around the idea that you have this additional piece that wasn't part of one solid cabinet, it's effectively no different than having multiple drivers that are handling different frequencies. That's all. You've turned a two-way speaker into a three-way speaker,
You look
or
at
a
these
three-way speaker into a four-way. That's all.
these high end like Wilson Audio comes to mind, where they have each driver in a separate box, and they come into your house and they assemble it all together. Now, just imagine that's what your speaker is like, except one of them you decide not to assemble it in the same spot because it's way too big, and you put it over in the corner instead. That's all it is. It's the same speaker. It's the same speaker. So, as far as your buyer's remorse, yeah, I feel for you here. I want you to love these speakers. They certainly have a lot going for them. They did give you what you wanted, which was louder and lower. Now
not
that
as
we've
low
got
as you were hoping. Yeah,
not as low as you were hoping, but I can understand that. But now you need to decide whether or not that's something you really needed. Because a lot of times we think, I know I do this all the time. I'm like, yeah, I need a car that can go faster. Now I live in Florida, and you think, well, what does that have to do with anything? We got a lot of old people in Florida, and they drive really slow, like all the time. So you can't. We have tons of traffic too. I see these guys run around these Lamborghinis, right? They are going 30 miles an hour most of the time. Do they need a Lamborghini to go 30 miles an hour? No, but sometimes they want it, and maybe that's what you want here. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, I want something that can play louder, and a little bit lower, so that when I move to a bigger room, when I put these in a bigger room, I will have what I need, because the Super Zeros won't give me that. If that's the case, then your purchase was not for vain. Not, you can still use those in the future. So just, get back to us. I'd like to hear the resolution of this. Aiden. So Aiden installed a shelf high on his back wall, and he has his projector sitting on that shelf. One of the air ducts for his air conditioning is directly above his projector. He lives in Florida. Representing there here. And the AC is running most of the time. So should he have any concerns? Is condensation something he should potentially worry about? I want to be dead honest with you. I saw this. I was like, oh, I wish I had an AC vent right above my projector. I do wish I had an AC vent right now. Condensation. Is this something he should worry about? I don't know if I would worry about it. I wouldn't worry about it. I got to be honest with you. I wouldn't worry about it, because that thing's going to put off a bunch of heat. And keeping it cool is not bad. And it's not like it's right directly on it. It's got like a foot clearance, it's kind of blowing forward anyways, in front of the projector. It's not blowing directly down onto it. I don't know that I would worry about. Plus heat rises. So
yeah, well, it's, condensation happens when warm air meets cool air, but it's typically warm, moist air meeting cool air. And the air coming out of the projector is warm, but it's not terribly moist. It doesn't have a lot of moisture in there. So
unless there's already moisture in the room, which is the case.
Right. So I mean, the condensation would be happening on the vents, on the AC vent. There, it might form droplets, and the droplets would come down. Right. That's how this would go. It wouldn't be that there's moist air coming out of your AC vent blowing directly onto the onto the projector and droplets forming directly on the projector. That's not the direction that the droplets would go. So it would be droplets forming on the duct and then falling down. I don't think this is super likely, because the air that's coming out of your AC, it's conditioned, right? So that shouldn't be containing a whole lot of moisture. And the warm air coming out of the projector isn't containing a whole lot of moisture. It would be the ambient air might have a fair amount of moisture being in Florida, but I wouldn't be super concerned about this. Keep an eye on it for, while you're using it. If you notice some droplets forming on the vent, then there's your answer. You might want to, place another shelf over top of the projector to stop any droplets from coming down. But yeah, I wouldn't be super concerned about it.
I mean, if it were me. Yeah. First of all, you don't have to watch it while the projector's in. That's not the projector operation is not going to cause this to happen. What's going to happen is the condensation is going to form up there when the AC's blowing, and it's hot in the room. However it gets hot in the room. So, July, August, every once in a while, go up there, see if there's anything going on. I mean, if it were me, I'd get like one of those little chamois things, and I just put it on top of my projector underneath the vent. Just in case. So, I mean, all it's going to do is collect the moisture, if there is any, and keep it from being absorbed inside of the projector,
which will then be on the warm projector, so it'll evaporate and
it'll be fine. And just don't block any vents that are on the projector. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I saw that. I was like, oh, I wish I had that vent. I really, that was my initial reaction, because those projectors get hot, and when they get hot, the fans kick on, they get louder. This is great. Keep it cool, man. Especially in Florida. People come into my home theater in Florida like, man, it gets hot in that room. I'm like, well, first of all, it's a small room. Second of all, like 17 of you people came in here, and there's a projector going on. That room's going to get hot no matter what. I mean, what are you going to do? Nelson. First of all, Nelson's got a great looking home theater. If you're seeing these images and you're not going, oh, I wish that was my home theater, then you were wrong, because this is a great looking home theater. I don't know what that big white box is yet, but we're going to find out. And I don't necessarily love the placement of the subs, but we'll get there. Nelson's room is 20 feet by 15 by 8. He recently replaced his pair of Vandersteen V2W subwoofers with a pair of dual SVS PB16 Ultras, which are those massive things in the corners.
The largest model that SVS sells, the new PB16 Ultras.
It's about 2 model sizes bigger than he needed, maybe 3. To be honest with you, this is not that big of a room, but
way bigger than he needs for this room.
I respect your decision, sir. Anyways, he tried a few different locations for the subs, and he ran Odyssey Multi QXC32 from his Marantz AV8802A Pre-Pro. On the plus side, overall output and minimal distortion are incredible, I guess. How do you even hear them when you barely turn them on? The volume knob, he's just like, click. All right, that's enough. Back off.
Yep.
Make it 12 on the trim. Rob lives your exact situation, except his room's even smaller, I think. Yeah. On the plus side, and when extremely low frequencies hit, he feels as though he's in the middle of the scene, and it's a new, amazing experience for him, and possibly fracturing bones in his collar. But we'll see. On the minus side, it does seem to him that his old V2Ws provided more of a punch in the mid bass. For example, when drums are pounding, he felt more of a punch with his Vandersteens than he's feeling right now with his PB16 Ultras. So what gives? Is there a way to make the SVSs sound similar to with drums to the way his Vandersteens used to?
Yes.
I'm sure there is. Turn off Odyssey?
Oh, no, you don't have to do that.
You could give it. I mean, you could, especially with the Odyssey. He's got a new one, right?
He doesn't. He can leave Odyssey where it is. The SVSs themselves have a parametric EQ built in, 3-band parametric EQ. Yeah. You give yourself a little bump in the mid bass, which is try probably if you're talking drums between 50 and 80 hertz. Give yourself a little bump between 50 and 80 hertz. You can use the parametric EQ that's available in the SVS subwoofers themselves, and there you go. You got your kick drum back. I'm thinking that your older subs, I mean, the older subs, they cut off at about 35 hertz. They probably distorted a little bit more too, to be honest.
Yeah.
This is a very common thing. We've mentioned this before. You get 2 well-placed, well-set-up, excellent subwoofers, and you think your bass got quieter. That is a very common effect.
Happened to me.
Yep. Happened to me too. So very, very common effect. And a lot of that is actually due to a lack of distortion. It can also be due to a lack of non-uniform base. Now that you have, two subs that are positioned really well, although you had two before, so maybe that was already the case. But yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with saying, I want a little bit more mid-bass kick. You throw a little parametric EQ in there, and voila. So to me, this is not really a downside or a challenge. It's completely possible to do what you want to do.
Yes. And when you said, "Oh, I'm not hearing as much of this in there," whenever somebody gets dual subs and said, "Hey, my old subs had more of this in there," I'm like, "Yeah, distortion." They did. That's right. You got used to it,
right?
Or unevenness, and you liked it more.
Well, especially when they're like, everything used to shake and keep shaking after
right.
the bass sound stopped. I'm like, that's not actually a desirable thing, right?
That's not what you want. That's not the thing. Yeah. No.
But we get it. We totally get it. So
yeah. So yeah, and if it's your preference, knock it out, dude. We're not going to judge you.
Heck yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Chances are, though, those SVSs are a little bit more linear, and that's why you're not hearing.
And they have
the thing that uses
no distortion. I mean, especially with how quiet relative to how loud they can play in your room size. They're like, am I even on? Yeah, I'm on.
I know. You know what I want to do? I know this is bad, but I almost want him to like turn them all the way up. And then
God.
use a harmony remote to press play from the other room. During like the opening scene of like pick a Star Wars movie, right? And then just don't go in the room.
Don't turn it all the way up.
You will throw up all. Yeah. You will throw up. Can you imagine though? Come on,
tell
me that would
be. He's gonna break that. Gonna break that nice little amplifier that's sitting between his speakers there. So
I won't break the amplifier. It'll be fine. Might cause structural damage.
Yeah.
To your room. That is not even a joke. You will flex the walls.
Stuff
you should
off walls. Yep.
Empty the room first. His room is so pretty though. So
it is.
Come back in here, and all the pictures are tilted to the side. They're all askew, right? 3 of them are on the ground. A plant has exploded. It's totally worth it. If you don't walk in and go, "That was worth it," then you're not an AVRanter. I'm sorry. All right. You've been tasked, sir. Go get out there and do it. Moani, right? Did I say it right? Moani?
I say Moani. I don't think he's ever corrected us yet, so I'm not sure. I say Moani.
Moani. I'll go with Moani.
Sure.
Was considering buying a JVC X570 projector, but the JVC's website makes it quite clear that the more expensive 770 and 970 models include their real color imaging, which is a DCI P3 color filter that lets those models produce wider colors than the 570.
Mm-hmm.
So is not having that color filter a big loss? Should he wait longer for the more affordable options? He is concerned. I don't know the answer to this question.
So, I mean, the X570 is technically a wide color gamut projector because it can produce colors wider than Rec 709, which is like the only requirement for calling it wide color gamut capable, but it doesn't reach the full DCI P3 color gamut. That's why the more expensive models have the extra color filter. Interestingly, the less expensive Epson 540 UB also has a very similar color filter to expand its gamut of colors to nearly the full DCI P3 gamut. In both cases, putting that filter in place, and you do so by selecting the Cinema picture mode, then they have a couple of different ones, but if they're named Cinema, it puts that filter in place. And most people say, if you're listening, you can actually hear it click. It's like a physical filter that moves into the light path. And it cuts the light output as well. So it's almost a choice, because you either get brighter highlights for high dynamic range, or you get the wider color. It's awfully hard to have both, because if you get the wider color with the filter, you cut the light output. So your high dynamic range highlights aren't quite as bright anymore, or you move the filter out of the way and you get the bright highlights, but then you don't get the wider color. So yeah, should he worry about the 570? If you're the type of person who knows enough to worry about it, I'm almost tempted to say either look for maybe an X750, because those are being cleared out. they're not quite as advanced. Like they don't automatically switch into HDR picture mode when they sense an HDR image. You have to manually put them into the HDR mode, the X750. But the X750 is the direct predecessor to the X770, and it had that color filter. So I would either maybe do that, or I would maybe wait to see what Epson does to replace the 540, because the one downfall of the 540 was that it could not accept a 4K 60 frames per second signal.
Oh, right.
It topped out at 4K 30 frames per second. And of course, 4K 24 was fine. So if you're okay with waiting a little bit more to either save up more money, look for a used or a clearance X750, or see what Epson does to replace the 5040 UV. That's kind of, because I mean, if you're knowledgeable enough to worry about it, I'm like, you're probably going to want the DCI color.
I would focus on the fact that it got dimmer. Like I would try to remember that,
yeah,
you know, and try to unlearn what you have learned. You're like, oh, well, yeah, you got the DCI color, but my picture's brighter. I'll take brightness over fake extra colors that I can't really see anyways.
Yeah, because if having the slightly dimmer image is going to bother you and you'd rather just be like brighter, well, then you're not going to use that DCI filter anyway.
That's right.
So
it's like those
that would be something, yeah.
It's like those auto irises that I always turn off and everything. Right. You're like, as soon as you turn it on, you're like, what is that noise up there? You're like, what is going on up there? And it's the auto iris doing auto iris things, trying to adjust to the darkness, dimness, whatever. Yeah, it's like, go ahead, give me the thing that I'm never going to use. So, should you wait? I don't know that I would, but I can understand if you would. You just have to decide for yourself what's most important for you.
I mean, there's some of us, and this goes for all kinds of different kind of equipment, where like, I know what I really truly want.
Yeah.
Here's the step down that I can afford right now. I'm like, from experience, I'm like, wait until you can get the thing you truly want, because you will always feel like you got not quite what you wanted. That's a terrible feeling.
Yeah. Carl says he needs a 50-foot 4K certified HDMI cable for use with the Sony 4K projector in a classroom. Dude, where do you teach? I want to go there and watch movies with you. So what do we recommend? Okay. Now there's a link on here.
Uh-huh.
I have not clicked it yet.
Okay.
But I want to guess. I mean, I know it's no monoprice, but it's just a bunch of letters and stuff. I have no idea what that means. Is it some sort of optical solution?
You are bang on the money. It is a fiber optic HDMI cable.
Yeah, you got to go fiber optic at this distance. You just
can't, this length.
Yeah, you can't do copper cable. I'm gonna click now. Let me see here.
Yeah, so it's not super cheap. It's $160 for the 50-foot version, but compared to what fiber optic HDMI cables cost from other places, that's very cheap actually. And you know what? Honestly, not too bad. If you look at the price for a 50-foot copper HDMI cable from, say, Blue Jeans cable, it's actually more than $160.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah.
Honestly, $160 isn't bad. It's also like thinner and bendy and easy to use compared to how thick a copper cable would need to be for this length. So yeah, like I was saying, presently there are no HDMI high-speed premium certified copper HDMI cables longer than 25 feet. That's what's out there. But these optical ones, these fiber optic ones, they can go up to like 300 feet because it's fiber optic. So
it's light.
Yeah. That's the solution. I think that's pretty
150.
reasonable.
I don't feel like it's that bad. $3 a foot.
$160 for 50 feet. That's really not that bad. All things considered.
Not that bad. Yeah. I would, if somebody told me that, I was going to say, if somebody told me that copper cable, like a 25-foot copper cable was $3 a foot, I'd be like, yeah, I guess I can kind of see that.
Now I will mention these fiber optic cables, they tend to not work with ARC, the audio return channel.
Right, sure.
With a projector, that's clearly not an issue, right?
No.
The projector doesn't have any sound sources that you need to send back to an AV receiver, so not worried about that.
I mean, unless you plugged a Roku stick or a Chromecast in the back of your projector, and why on God's green earth would you do that? I don't know. But you could theoretically do that. So in this case, don't do that.
I don't think I've even seen a projector that has an audio return channel HDMI port on it, because they don't.
They have MHL
side.
MHL a lot, but you won't see
MHL, but not audio return channels. So, but just so folks know, that is like the one limitation of these fiber optic cables. But most people going for an HDMI cable this long are probably going to a projector.
Projectors, that's right.
Projectors don't need audio return channel.
the number of times people need audio returning channels can probably be counted on like one hand. I mean, there's just not that many
You
times.
can always run an optical cable if you need to.
That's right.
Optical audio, that is.
Michael, and this question comes from Austria. So this is a new one for us, I think. I don't think we've ever officially
explicitly
heard from
known
Austria.
that it was Austria, yeah.
No, we've done Finland, right? We did Finland, didn't we? Did we
Denmark?
do Denmark? That's right.
I'm pretty sure we've had someone from Germany. Pretty sure.
I feel that way. I know Japan. We had Scott. He asked a bunch of questions from Japan. Of course, Australia, Canada, America, Puerto Rico.
UK, India?
Yep. Oh, definitely India. I forgot about the guy with all the
Philippines?
Philippines for sure. So Austria, Michael, thank you for contacting us. Michael will be moving to a new condo this year and is planning for a theater setup in his living room, which is open to the kitchen, dining room, total roughly 3,600 cubic feet.
Okay.
He didn't give us that in feet, did he? He gave us that in...
No, he translated it to feet. He's like, the whole space is roughly 23 feet wide, 21 feet long, but that's the whole space, not his theater portion area.
So his home theater area will be 15 feet from front to back, and with a front wall that is only about a little bit over 8 feet across. There's a balcony door to the left that needs to be remain accessible, and everything is a bit of a tight squeeze. Okay. So I can't see this picture. It's very big. It's very small. So I'm scrolling. Oh, here's the bigger version. I just had to keep scrolling. Little kitchen block. I've always wanted a kitchen block. All right, he's already decided to go. He'll go with the 65-inch Sony Z9D. I said Z for.
I think he even translated that because I'm pretty sure in Europe it is the ZD9. I have no idea why they do silly things like that, but yeah.
So, and a Magnat THX Ultra 2 wall mountable speakers. He'll have 2 feet of space behind him and 13 feet to the front wall from his primary seat. He's interested in immersive audio, and because the system will be used for regular TV and streaming content in addition to movies, he's interested in upmixing, particularly the Oro 3D upmixer, which seems to be a much bigger deal in Europe than in the US and Canada. Hey, if it's any deal in Europe, it's a bigger deal than this here, but that's good. He's planning to use the Denon X6300H and a 5.2.4 layup that will be usable both for Oro 3D and Atmos. Looking at diagrams, does this seem to be a reasonable plan? I gotta scroll back and look at the diagrams here.
Yeah, so I mean, he was well aware. He said in his email it's going to be front heights and rear heights, and that is exactly what you need to label them in order to be compatible with both Atmos and DTS:X for that matter, and Oro 3D. So that's well done. Now, the speakers, these Magnat speakers, I've heard of that brand before. I didn't realize they had this THX Ultra 2 certified line. I really like this line. I got to be honest. I like the design of these. If you check out the specs that they have posted, they have crazy high power handling. So I'm like, I'm kind of impressed by these.
Okay.
Yeah, so I like that. So they have these interesting Atmos modules. So those are their, what are they, A400s or something like that. But they have these Atmos modules, but they're somewhat unique in that they are a module that you could put on top of a regular speaker and have be up firing. But they also give you a switch on the back to alter their crossover to just make them into regular direct firing speakers that they suggest you can mount either directly on the wall or on your ceiling. So like if it's on the wall or on the ceiling, you have a direct mode. And if it's up firing, there's an up firing mode. I'm like, cool, that's a neat idea and a neat design. So his basic idea of, 4 of those Atmos modules, but he's actually going to have them high up on his walls, front heights and front rears. Looks good to me. The rest of his layout, I'm like, because of where things are, I'm a little concerned about that balcony door. It looks as though it swings inward toward where his TV is going to be. Make sure you put a doorstop on that. I'm sure he's thought of that.
I don't think that balcony doors do they often swing inward?
I don't know. I'm just seeing the arc on the diagram that looks like
I guess you're right. Yeah, right? I do see that. Yeah, that is odd.
Yeah, but there's no reason why you couldn't put a door stop on it to make sure it stops at 90 degrees. So that's okay, and I'm sure he's well aware of that. That's about my only concern. Other than that, I'm like, I don't see another way to lay out this theater than what he's proposed.
I guess he's not going to do a voice of God. Is that the thing? He won't be able to do a voice of God.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's kind of the...
You could get one more of those Magnat Atmos modules and do a voice of God, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the only thing I'm seeing missing here is a voice of God. Right. I agree. I mean, he doesn't have tons of options here.
No, I think he's done a good job of laying this out, and I think his equipment choices are very nice as well.
Yeah, his left surround is way over to the right side, which is not necessarily an issue. It is sort of just I'm just pointing it out that your left
Mm.
surround is basically on the couch, and the other one is a couple of feet off the couch. What does that
But
mean?
compared to where his primary seat is going to be, which is the
Which
X
is that
marked on the
X? Yeah,
diagram, it's pretty even. And I mean, you adjust the trim level as necessary, and that's about it.
I know he says that's where his primary seat's going to be, but do you really think you're going to sit
Slightly to the
that
right of
far
your
off to the
TV.
right of your
Well,
TV?
probably because it looks like it's a chaise
Yeah,
lounge type of extension, so
he's
he's
gonna be
probably
lying back
lying
on it.
back
Yeah,
on there. Yeah, I think you've done about as well as you can with this
yeah,
room layout. Yeah,
it looks fine.
yeah.
It looks okay. I'm just worried about your voice of God speaker. All right, so blah 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 blah. Moving to subwoofers, the layout and total space
Mhm.
limits placement options. Diagonal placement, of course, isn't possible. And subwoofer size, its best thought was a pair of SVS SB2000 placed on the front wall on either side of the TV, or a single PB2000 or Ultra 13. I'm sorry, it's SB13 Ultra placed in the front corner. I'm guessing the front left corner. He
Yeah.
wants a symmetrical look. Can we think of any better solutions looking at the back of this thing?
I mean, yeah. Given the restrictions and how tight you are for space up front, and that you got to make sure that that door swinging open is going to work. 3,600 cubic feet. That's you know technically it's a large room, but it's on the small end of a large room. Dual SB 2000s, I wouldn't have too much of a problem. And he said there is a neighbor like just on the other side of one of these walls, so he's not going to be like cranking it. He's not
Me
going
crushing
for
it.
full reference volume.
Yeah.
So output wise, I think that's fine. Placement wise, I don't see a whole bunch of other options for you
I'm really
either.
confused about these curtains on the bottom of this. I mean, as we're looking at this picture on the bottom, it
Uh-huh.
says curtains and it looks like they open. Something opens.
I
So is
think
that a
those are
window or a door?
yeah, I think those are like doors that go out to a landing or something like that. But he's going to have
Okay.
curtains that can close over them.
And close over that. He's just letting us know that.
Yeah.
Okay, because that changes like placement of things
Mm.
as well. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
Again, I think you've done about as well as you reasonably can in this space.
I kind of the thing is that he's going to be paying for shipping, right?
Right.
And shipping to Austria can't be cheap to begin with. And
Well,
then
SBS does have European distributors, so he doesn't have to ship it all the
maybe
way from the States to Austria.
maybe it won't be that bad, but
Yeah.
having the dual subwoofers would be nice to giving
Yep.
him more options. I don't know that you're going to be able to do any sort of placement that because the only other place I really see is if based on where you have this one is if you placed it between wherever it says kitchen, wherever it says shelf on the right wall, the second one, front one, the front left corner of your
Nah.
area, and the other one across the room from it
Oh
over there
man.
by that shelf.
Yeah.
That's sort of kind of mirrored middle of the wall placement ish. You
Given that this
know,
isn't even a rectangle room, though.
I know it's like I
Uh,
said, it's really not. Or you could actually maybe put it underneath the right speaker, and then in that other place I just said, that might even be better. I don't really know.
but you know what? Since he
It's
wants a symmetrical look, I'm like, I think his plan is very reasonable.
oh yeah, I think so too. That's the only other placement option I see. I'm just
Yeah.
throwing it out there. So with both subs on the front wall, you have to play with the phase to get the semblance of uniformity, right? Can we explain
Hmm.
how to go about this? Does he need to rerun Odyssey every single time he adjusts the phase of one of the subwoofers?
No, thank goodness. That would
No,
be
you don't do that.
ridiculous.
Yeah. No. So yes, you will have to play with the phase.
Hmm.
Maybe. Or maybe you won't. Maybe we'll play with something that'll
Maybe he'll
sound good.
just totally luck out, right?
You'll
Yeah.
luck out. So we can all let's all cross our fingers and hope for that one because there is the chance that you're just gonna luck out. So how do you do this? The easiest way is to send a single sweep through woofers at the same time,
Hmm.
right? Where they're placed. Make sure they're level matched,
Right.
and then send that sweep through your subwoofers. Then what
Yep.
you're going to be
In mono.
in mono, of course, your subwoofers should always be running in mono. Then adjust the phase on one sub. Pick one.
Hmm.
Doesn't make a difference. Probably the easiest one to get to. That's the one I would go with. And then adjust the phase a little bit and walk around the room. And listen to the evenness
Yeah.
of the sweep. So what we're not talking about is you're not going for the same volume across the entire sweep. What you want is if there's a change in volume, like gets louder or softer, it always gets louder or always gets softer at the same part of the sweep, no matter where you are in the room.
Right.
or in this case, where you are sitting on that couch.
Right. Yes.
And
Uniformity. That's what we're going for.
Because once you have the uniformity of the volume across those seats, then your Odyssey can go back and fix that. Now, if you're the only one that cares, and I haven't heard anything yet about anybody else caring about this other than him. So if you're the only one that cares, then just set up both of your subwoofers, put the microphone in your seat, and then that's it. You're done. Don't do anything else because it'll correct for that one place.
Close, the multiple microphone positions, keep them all close to your primary seat if that's the only seat you care about. And Odyssey Multi-Q XT32 with sub-EQ HD will do a pretty darn good job if that's all you care about all on its own. So this could be quite simple for you.
Yes, if you don't care about the rest of the couch.
Right.
If you do care about the rest of the couch, then you'll have to run the sweep, listen as you scoot across the couch. You're listening for the uniformity and the volume across the frequency sweep.
So if that's what you're doing, you leave one of the subs at 0 degrees on the phase knob. The other one, I mean, for simplicity's sake, go about 5 degrees at a time. If you really want to get granular, mathematically, you would go 3 degrees at a time. But man, that could be a lot of trial and error.
That's a long time.
That'd be a lot of trial and error. So I mean, if you went 6 degrees at a time, that's pretty good, right? If you go 6 degrees at a time, that keeps the math quite reasonable.
I'd probably go like 10, but that's
right. Yeah,
I wouldn't.
But yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, but you only have to do it once. And after you're done, you would actually want to set things up. And this actually works nicely if you are going to do the Voice of God channel, because that uses the second subwoofer pre-out. That second subwoofer pre-out gets snatched away and turned into the Voice of God pre-out. But you know what? If you're doing this uniform subwoofer adjusting the phase manually thing, you then would not want sub-EQ HT adjusting the distances of the subwoofers independently, because that would mess up what you just did manually. So you would want a single subwoofer output feeding both subs.
That's true.
That's actually what you would want. So it all works out swimmingly if you want to do Voice of God and this manual phase adjustment.
So regardless, if you go through with all this and you do the manual phase adjustment, you want to make sure you're only using one of your 2 subwoofer outputs, regardless.
Yeah.
You want your subwoofers to be playing in mono. Now you can like to level match. You can plug them both in, right? Plug them both in, and then manually adjust. How would you do that?
Oh, just do normal level matching. Don't mess around with
that.
stuff. Yeah.
All right.
You play one sub, you get it to one level. You play the other sub, you get it to the same level. They're level matched. You're done.
There you go. The room's walls and ceilings are concrete and the floor is wood. So except for a rug and some curtains, it's all reflective. What do we suggest for room treatments? And specifically, what about the first reflection points of the left and right speakers? If left speaker will have a wall right next to it while the right is open, is this likely to cause issues, and how can you correct them? Okay, so what do we, with the room like yours, what do we suggest for room treatments? As much as frickin' possible.
Yeah, anywhere that you can put a zone of absorption, put a zone of absorption, including the ceiling if you can.
If you can do it on the ceiling, do it on the ceiling. If you can do it on the walls, do it on the walls. You definitely do it behind your head.
Yes,
like
behind your there's a wall behind that couch. I can't imagine you're not allowed to have something behind that couch. If it's decorative, you get printed acoustic panels that have whatever image you want printed on them, and they double as your artwork. You've got to have something absorbing behind your couch for sure.
Yes, and that left front speaker, you want to put some absorption right next to it, and so that anything that's blowing into that, anything that's going into that wall will be as caught as possible. So as much absorption. Could be a bit of a
challenge, but whatever you can put beside that front left speaker, you want.
Make sure your rug is thick. Use a thick pad underneath it if you can.
Yeah.
Put absorption on your ceiling at your first reflection point of your ceiling if you can. Don't worry about the right speaker, about how it blows into the room, because that's just going to go bouncing around in there. You don't know what that's going to do.
Yeah.
So behind your head, to the left of the speaker, the front left speaker,
on the
as
ceiling
much as you can on the floor, and as much as on the ceiling if you can. That's what we suggest. And bass straps. I mean, I don't know where you're going to put them in here, but along the ceiling, I guess.
Yeah. After that, don't worry about placement. Just anywhere you could put some absorption, put it.
Literally anywhere. Like if you have art of
in
any
the
kind
shelf,
in here,
under your dining room table.
That's right.
Anything.
That's right. Anything. anything would be good in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to scroll back down. Lastly, could he could move the seats a little forward, but not much. Would that help with any acoustic problems? Can you shove whatever acoustic material you can behind that couch? Because then, yes.
And also, I just want to say he's going for a 65-inch screen from 13 feet away. That's only a 20.6 degree field of view, which is on the smaller side, especially for a nice 4K resolution display like this. So, however close you can put the seats, I would get them as close as is reasonable in this setup.
I agree.
Yeah, the closer the better.
Yeah. And he'll ask, lastly, is there anything else in this plan we think you should change? And I don't think we do.
The only thing I would say is, from the plan that you have, you don't need an X6300. You could get an X4300 and do everything you want to do for less money. That's the only thing I would point out here.
All right, there you go. Jim, this comes from Twitter. Jim asks, what are our thoughts on the Vizio SB3851/D 5.1 soundbar package versus the slightly larger and more expensive SB4051D? The 38-inch includes a 5-inch wireless subwoofer, while the 40 has a 6.5-inch flat subwoofer. Is the flat subwoofer any good? Does 38 inches wide versus 40 inches wide matter? Okay. Most of the time, these sound bars are built in the way they are built for specific TVs, especially if they're built by the manufacturer of the said TV. So I would, without looking at them, because I haven't, because whatever, bikes, I'm blaming bikes. I would imagine that that's part of what the size difference is. Now, if your question is, does the 5-inch subwoofer have any advantages over the 6.5-inch flat subwoofer? The reality is neither one of them is a subwoofer, so calling them that is just ridiculous. They're at best a base module, and the base doesn't care how flat or not flat its box is that it's coming out of. It cares about internal volume. So the internal volume will make a difference. So when you ask, does a 40-inch have any advantages over the 38 inches? Only if that increases the internal volume enough so that it gets slightly more bass because of it. I would doubt it.
Yeah,
I would doubt it. I would think that these would sound remarkably similar in almost every respect.
So I would refer you to the Wirecutter, where they've actually recommended the SB3851 as their top budget soundbar choice. That's against all brands. That was their top soundbar choice for a lower price, because there's much more expensive ones that do sound better. But they pointed out the 3851, and there's a 4451 as well, which might sound weird, because there's a 44 and a 45. So there's a 38, a 40, a 44, and a 45. Well, the 38 and the 44 use regular round 2.5-inch drivers in the soundbar itself. And they're like, those sound crisp, dialogue is really clear. It might not be perfectly linear sound, but we're not totally expecting that at this price point anyway, but it's really nice, crisp, clear, good, detailed, good treble sound. The 40 and the 45, even though they're wider, they're actually narrower. And they use these sort of rectangular drivers. They're not round drivers. Yeah, they're these sort of rectangular drivers. And according to Wirecutter and other people as well, they don't have as good treble clarity. There's like an issue with those sort of rectangular drivers. They can play a bit louder, a little bit lower, but they don't produce as clear treble. So I'm like, I would go for the clearer treble, because what I care about with a soundbar is that I can understand what people are saying.
That's pretty much all you're going for.
To me, that is like numero uno thing that is important. So out of these two, I would go for the 38. It's less expensive and it sounds clearer. And it's like neither of them have a great subwoofer. So I'd call that a wash.
Yeah. He says quite a few customer reviews mention issues with the wireless subwoofer connection, as in the signal drops quite frequently, apparently. Do we know if this is still an issue or anything has been done to fix it? I doubt that anything's been done to fix it.
It's a Bluetooth connection.
It's a placement issue. Bluetooth doesn't always go from my headphones to my back pocket, depending on where I am standing and what or orientation I'm standing in. This is a placement issue. People are taking their subwoofer, they're putting the soundbar at the front, and they're putting their in their great room. They're taking it and putting it all the way across the room. And then it works sometimes and cuts out sometimes, depending on whether or not somebody's using the microwave or whether or not there's a bunch of people in the way.
Yeah, other wireless noise from your Wi-Fi and your cordless phones and all kinds of things. Honestly, Vizio's, from everything that I've been seeing, it's no worse than any other brand.
It's just Bluetooth, man. Bluetooth sucks.
Yeah,
it's okay.
It isn't perfect. It isn't foolproof. But for the people where they've got a clear line of sight and they're within the recommended 30 feet, most people aren't having a problem. It's when you have a greater distance or you don't have a clear line of sight between the subwoofer and the soundbar. Or there's a lot of
interference or
there's a lot of interference. You're in a heavily wireless area. And people who have that problem with the Vizio have it with other wireless subwoofers from other brands too. So
yeah. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Plus, it's not a subwoofer. Stop calling it that. It's a lie. Infinite Gary. He asked, was 2016 the end of matte or semi-gloss TV screens? He's a dog with a phone. He's not going to let this go. Gary has been looking, and so far every single 2017 model with 4K and HDR appears to be super glossy. And if that's the way the TVs are going to be from now on, he's going to find it very difficult to ever upgrade. So do we have any info on this?
Nothing more than you have, Gary, unfortunately. And I agree with you. I don't like the super glossy screens either.
I'm not a huge fan of them. It doesn't tend to bother me that much, except when it does. It totally does.
Right. Yeah.
So this is why when they ask me to, advice on how they should set up their TV or whatever, and they're thinking of wall mounting it, and I look at the first thing I do is look at the placement of the windows in the house.
Yeah.
Like, dude, put the I'm just gonna place it on this mount. It's gonna be good. I'm like, no, you need a mount that can move, has to be able to come out, has to be able to rotate from one side to the other, because you're going to find that during certain times of the day you're going to get mad glare on that screen, and when that happens you're going to want to turn it just to adjust the screen so you don't see it. I agree. Okay, my guess, Gary, and this is not any insider information here, there's a cyclical nature to these things. Right now glossy is hot. Come back, I don't know. Maybe when somebody, Samsung or Sony or whatever, decides that their next big development is a non-reflective screen, something that we've had before in the past, but suddenly they're going to reinvent it, give it a new name, that has a bunch of acronyms or whatever that start with X or U or S.
Well, I'll say this: Vizio is probably your best bet. Because at the moment, Vizio is about the only one with a fair selection of semi-matte screens that aren't super glossy. So they're probably your best bet. Look at Vizio.
Yes, with a 5'8" viewing distance, which is basically me lying down between you and your screen. If I'm on my tiptoes, just a little bit. Would it be better to go with a 49-inch TV or 43-inch screen size? I'm going to go with 55, I think. That's what I would go with. 55 sounds about right for me.
So all
that's
I can
not
tell
a joke.
you is
That's what I'm honestly saying. I think that's
at that distance, a 43-inch gives you a 30.8 degree field of view, which is right about where SMPTE would tell you that your screen size should be.
Wrong.
Whereas a 49 gives you a 34.87 degree field of view, which is a little bit closer to that 36 degree field of view that most of us consider like the minimum for movies. But this is like casual viewing, is TV viewing, and I happen to know Gary himself tends to like a smaller field of view. He doesn't like to have to move his eyes to see the edges of the screen. So I would err, in Gary's particular case, right towards SMPTE. I think he in particular will prefer the 30 degree field of view, and at that distance the 43-inch would give it to him. So there you go.
I would like a 55, please. But Gary, I understand.
I'd go larger myself, but I can totally appreciate he is someone, when he goes to the movie theater, would sit farther back, which is fine. That's
right. Perfectly fine with me. Justin Not Bieber on Facebook. Now, Justin has decided his $750 budget isn't enough to get him a stereo tube amplifier that he really loved. So he's considering a few different integrated amps. He's got the Emotiva TA100, which is $400. The Peachtree Deco 65, which is $800. The Riga Brio R, it says almost $1,000, and the PS Audio Sprout, which is $500. Any of these stick out, good or bad?
Yeah, the Emotiva sticks out as being
Yeah.
the best value. Good. And with some of the other questions I know are coming up, actually does everything you want to do for the lowest amount of money. So the Emotiva sticks out, in my opinion. That's where I'd be.
The names don't ring too many bells. PS Audio is something it's stuck in my head as somebody who sells marketing more than they sell equipment. I don't know if that's true or not.
The Peachtree is a Class D amplifier.
Ooh, no. I know Peachtree was the other one. I was like, I don't remember that. Now the Riga or whatever that is, I don't know anything about.
Yeah, they're
the
mostly
Peachtree
a UK
and
brand.
PS Audio both like stuck in my head as something that my initial reaction was negative, and of course Emotiva is going to be positive because I rarely have a bad experience with them. So ideally, his choice would have a good headphone amplifier in it, as well as plus a phono input. Since he likes to switch speakers quite often, he should be able to drive just about anything, although never all that loud. Does that make one of those choices stick out as the best option?
Yeah, the Emotiva.
Yeah, the Emotiva.
It's got a phono input. It's got digital inputs. It's got USB input because I know Justin does a lot with computer sourced audio. So it's nice to have a USB input. 50 watts per channel Class AB amplifier. If it's not playing too loud and you're sitting close to it, that should power just about anything just fine.
Yeah.
And it's the cheapest.
The problem, you see, this is what happens when you get into high-end audio. It's like at some point they're like, we're going to put less stuff in here to just differentiate ourselves. And when that's fine if you're a high-end user and like to fiddle with your gear and don't mind, that all these whippersnappers using computers and you haven't upgraded past your flip phone yet. You're not that guy. Get the thing that has all the things in it that you need.
Yeah.
And that's the Emotiva. So he says the Emotiva only no, stop there for a second. Only specs the speaker outputs from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Now, I will say that those are only the hertzes that you can hear. But go on. Some of the other integrated amps spec the speaker outputs up to 50 kilohertz. Is that a difference worth worrying about?
No.
Not even a little bit. Okay. Now you will find some speakers out there that are like, we have a super trio that'll play up to 100 kilohertz. Well, it could play up to a bazillion kilohertz. I mean, other than probably killing you with whatever gamma radiation that was coming out of it. You can't hear it. You can't hear it.
You probably can't hear 20 kilohertz. I mean, Justin's a young guy, but probably can't even hear that.
Let's say he can. Let's say he can.
All right.
Call Emotiva. Yeah. And ask them whether or not if just say you had a source that played past 20 kilohertz and that put out a signal that was at 22 kilohertz. Would the Emotiva reproduce, or is there a hard filter right there? I'm guessing it's going to let it go through just fine. They're just going to be like, you'll never hear it. Like, we just pretend I can. Well, you'll never hear it. Will it do it? Yes, it will do it. Okay, it will do it. That's my guess. His original plan was to run stereo speakers only, but now he's considering adding a SVS PB1000 to this 2-channel setup. So how could he connect that subwoofer? Does the integrated amp need to have pre-outs? Would he use left-right pre-outs or just one, like the way an AV receiver has a single S subwoofer output? Would he need to set the low-pass filter on the subwoofer itself? And how would the volume work? Turns up the volume dial on the integrated amp. Will the subwoofer get louder along with the speaker? So will he need to independently adjust the subwoofer using his own internal volume dial? Yes.
The Emotiva has a subwoofer output. Now, it's not, this is important, it's not a bass managed subwoofer output. All they did was take the left and right signals, sum them together, and give you another output. Which means you do need to use the low pass filter that's built into the subwoofer, which is fine. That's really not a problem. But other than that, it's just another pre-out, which means when you turn the volume dial on the front of the Emotiva, the volume on that subwoofer output goes up and down, just like the front left and right speaker levels volumes go up and down. So it has a subwoofer output. It's not a bass managed subwoofer output, so you do need to use the low pass filter on the sub, but other than that, you're good to go.
For everybody else that's listening to this and going, what? Okay, on the back of your subwoofer, there is a thing that has like the crossover frequencies that you could be using. Most all of you at some point have wondered what to do with that. And we either told you to turn it all the way up as high as it will go to defeat it, or go into bypass mode if you have that option. That's because your receiver does the crossing over for you. In this case, this thing does not. It puts out the full range signal, so you need to use the crossover.
So you don't want your subwoofer trying to produce 20 kilohertz. That wouldn't be great. You don't want it doing that.
So he says there was a mix-up with his Martin Logan Motion 4 speaker order, so he canceled it. And he went with the gold mix-up. How does the mix-up make him cancel? Okay.
I don't know. That's what he did.
So instead, he went with the Golden Ear SuperSat speakers for his living room system instead. Where should the SuperSats be crossed over? 120 hertz? Would using a crossover higher than 80 hertz potentially make dialogue more difficult to understand? I mean, maybe for James Earl Jones. But
well, even he's not going much below 200 hertz.
I know. That's I'm like, no. Bass. How low can you go? About 200 hertz for James Earl Jones. Yeah. So you could look at the speaker specs. They'll tell you where you should cross them over, and then use your own ears. Start there. Adjust the crossover down a little bit. Adjust the crossover up a little bit. See where you like it.
But yeah, in general, about 120 hertz is good for those SuperSats. They play down to about 100 hertz, but you don't want to cross them over right where they are falling off, right? You want to give a little bit of headroom. So yeah, about 120 hertz works really nicely. Works really well for the Revlon wall speakers too, about 120 hertz.
So he's getting some pushback, I'm guessing, from the spouse about potentially having 3 subwoofers in the living room. So duals for the surround sound system and a single for the 2-channel system only system. So is there a way for just the dual subwoofers to play double duty?
Not easily and conveniently. I mean,
I was
physically,
thinking about this.
But
it's theoretically possible.
Yeah. I mean, once again, going back to that Emotiva, it actually has 2 summed outputs. So there's no reason why you couldn't physically, so what you could do is you take the 2 subwoofer outputs from your AV receiver for your surround sound system, and these being SVS subwoofers, they have left and right inputs, right? Now, it doesn't matter because they're getting a mono signal in either case. So you could connect the subwoofer outputs from your surround sound AV receiver to 1 input each on the back of your subs, then connect the subwoofer outputs from the Emotiva integrated amp to the other inputs on the SVS subs. And as long as you don't have, well, even if you did have both going, they'd mix together and it would sound crazy weird, but you're not going to damage anything. But, assuming you're using one or the other, it could, but
the problem
you would have to separately level match them.
Yeah, the volume, you're sitting in a completely different place. So every time you switch from your headphone or your other system to this system, you would have to re-level match your subwoofers every single time.
Plus, with the Emotiva, you'd want the low-pass filters activated. With the surround sound system, you wouldn't. So that's a lot of changes you'd have to make on the dual subwoofers every time you want to switch systems.
No, it's fix this problem using the headphone output of your AV receiver and not having this other system. But yeah, there's no really easy way to make this happen. It can be done.
Yeah, physically it can be done. It's just not terribly convenient.
It would make it so that you would never want to do it, though.
Nah.
I mean, basically, is what it would come down to. So he says he'll likely end up using using headphones fairly often while watching TV. He preferred not to have a long headphone cord going from his seat to the front of the room. Can he maybe attach a wireless stereo transmitter to the Zone 2 outputs of his slimline Marantz receiver, then have the wireless receiver attached to a headphone amplifier that he could put on his end table, and how much would that degrade his sound quality? Well, there's plenty of wireless headphones you can purchase to do this with.
None of which I think are stellar.
No, none of them are all that good, but it would solve this little problem here. So can it be done? Absolutely can be done.
Oh, yeah, now, it can be done. And the way he's proposing could work as well. The only limitation being every single one of your sources would need to have a stereo audio connection. Because for your surround sound, you're going to be feeding that via HDMI, I assume. But when you want to use the Zone 2 output, you have to go to a stereo audio connection to do that with the slimline Marantz receivers. So, I mean, again, that's not like maybe there's only 2 sources you'll ever use with the headphones primarily. So that's not the end of the world. That can totally be done.
Yeah.
But that's just something to be aware of. But what he's proposing can work. And if you're using like say the Outlaw wireless transmitter, the Outlaw stereo wireless, or the Audio Engine
Yeah.
stereo wireless transmitter, they work pretty darn well. They really
Yeah.
do. So
And as far as degrading the
yeah,
audio quality, that I wouldn't be too concerned about. I mean, you should get stereo
no,
CD quality
yep.
out of these wireless solutions that are out there. It's not. I mean, it's you get HD quality TV broadcasts over the air. There's no reason to think that you can't get CD quality music broadcasts from a device in your house.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry too much about that. Can this be done? Yes. The subwoofer thing, nah, really. Sorry. All right. We're popping through these things. How much we got? Half an hour left before.
Jeez.
I mean, we're only on 12, but according to this document, we're 3/4 of the way down this, at least 2/3. Jonathan. Jonathan says, "What do we make of Robert Schneier's editorial posted on Stereo?" I can't say what. Why does there's no Smiths anymore? I had a kid I was working with today. They spelled Leo with a J.
Okay.
And I keep looking at it. I know how to pronounce it, but I can't, because it's like they deconstructed the word and put it back together like by using it was very confusing. Like, parents, stop it. Anyways, that's not this guy's name. This guy's Robert. He's fine. Robert's Schreier's editorial post on Stereophile titled "R.I.P. Audiophilia." It was nice knowing. Audiophilia sounds weird when you say it out loud. Writing it looks fine, but out loud it sounds like you're doing something wrong to audio, which actually works in this case. It was nice knowing you, which he says when he states that audiophilia is dead because the best audio equipment is now outlandishly expensive. He says that at one point the best was within reach of anyone with enough patience, which is still true no matter how you look at it. It's like saying that you can't just walk anywhere anymore. We have to drive. No, you can walk. You just have to start like really early if you're trying to go to New York from Florida. Component. Okay, he says the best was within components now perform too many tasks, which is according to him more than one.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming music is too convenient, which means that our brains are being muddled by all the things in the airwaves, and some of it sounds pretty darn good. So while the best, it doesn't seem that much better, and it's gotten so crazy expensive that very decent has gotten cheaper. So the gap between the audiophiles and the mainstream factions is shrinking. So he concludes that audiophiles should maybe start calling themselves stereophiles, like the magazine he writes for.
That's right.
Instead, because it's no longer about owning the best sound, but rather it's about holding a certain attitude about sound systems. So let me see if I got this right. There's really good sound out there.
Uh-huh.
So there's no point going for the best sound anymore because the gap isn't wide enough. And to bridge that
get
gap
there is a huge expense.
It's a huge expense.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to disagree with him on a couple of points here. I know you're going to probably find this a little shocking, but I'm going to say that maybe this guy's just smoking a little bit too much of his own, whatever he's selling there.
You know what? I appreciated that, in my opinion. I mean, I guess he probably didn't mean to be this nakedly truthful. But I saw this and I'm like, oh, what you're not an audiophile. You're not a stereophile. You're an exclusionist. That's
exactly.
That's what you enjoy, is excluding other people from your
Absolutely.
hobby. Right? That's where you get your kicks. Is being like, it's either by saying, I have the best, no one else was patient and smart enough to recognize that this is the best, or since anybody can go out there and get pretty darn good sound for not a whole lot of money anymore,
they come listen to my system, which I spent thousands of dollars on. They go, well, I mean, yeah, it's good, but it's not that much better than mine.
But I have to be something different. So
right.
I will be a stereophile, because anybody can be an audiophile. Anybody can go out and spend a couple $1,000s and have fantastic sound these days, and maybe
surround
even with,
sound,
11
Atmos,
speakers.
Yeah.
But what I can do, what we can do, we who used to be called audiophiles, what we can do is be exclusively about stereo. That's what we can do, so we can still be exclusionists. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah. Uh, I do appreciate that he is recognizing that there's good sound out there,
Yeah.
because that's often too often the case that not the point. Now, what it really comes down to is that this idea of spending an exclusionary idea is really at the heart of almost every single hobby. And anybody that says it's not
That's right. Well, it's
is lying to themselves.
It's the whole loving an indie band until they get popular, right?
Well, there's that. But I mean, think about any hobby. Riding bicycles, I'm sure I'm going to find out, is like this. Motorcycles are certainly about it, especially if you're a Harley guy versus a not Harley guy, or girl. I'm not going to judge. A sports bike person, cruiser, whatever. There's people out there that are just, they can talk your ear about the minutia of everything and why theirs is absolutely the best. I accidentally asked a dude one time who was working on he was a plumber working on my house. We had a leak in the garage. It was very odd and very disconcerting. And it was leaking all over the motorcycle, which is even worse. And he saw the motorcycle. He goes, well, I don't really call that a motorcycle because it's not a sports bike.
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to regret this, but why? And there he goes, right? It's like 2 hours. You won't leave my house. I'm like, will you fix the pipe and get out? Okay. It's not that I don't agree with the guy. I do. I like sports bikes. I don't like the bike we got. We got the bike because my wife wanted this bike. I like sports bikes. I get where he's coming from. But dude, seriously, shut up. Shut up. Okay. That's what I don't want us to be on this podcast. You come to me with B&W speakers. I'm okay with that. Do I like B&W speakers? Nope. I don't. I've heard them. I'm not that big on them. Do I like Triad speakers? Not really. Not particularly. I mean, I've heard them. They were all right. I think they're way too expensive. Do I like Bang & Olufsen speakers? Not particularly. Have I heard them? Are they good? Yeah, they're fine.
Pretty.
But you come to me and you say, I've got these speakers and I love them. The last thing I'm going to do is try to convince you to get new speakers. How many times in this podcast have we said, your speakers are fine. You don't need to buy new speakers. What you need is, your receiver is fine. You don't need to buy an amp. What you need to do is, work with placement, work with your room, do these other things. We are not exclusionary here. Okay. You come to me and say, I want new speakers. I'll help you find some. No doubt about it. You come to me and say, I've got these speakers. Remember the guy just last couple of weeks, JBL speakers. I want to upgrade to new JBL speakers. What do we say? Don't do it. You're not going to be happy. If you're going to upgrade, get something completely different. And if he came back and said, I really like the Bang & Olufsen's, good. Knock him out. Or weird looking, cigarette putter outer thingies that outside stores these days. What do they look like little tripod things? Whatever. Fine. You like them? I'm happy for you. But this right here is exactly right. This is what hobbies, unfortunately, degenerate. And I do mean that in the most negative sense of the word, degenerate into. They degenerate in a way of feeling superior to other people. And that's not what it's supposed to be about. I don't want home theater. I don't want somebody to come to home theater and go, wow, I could never have this. Or, wow, you're really into this stuff. I'm like, no. Yeah, I'm just a dude who likes home theater. And I'm perfectly happy to share this with you. And I'm perfectly happy to help you get as close to whatever you're comfortable getting as you can.
And to be clear, I got zero problem if what you want to do is set up a 2-channel stereo only system, because that's what you want. I'm like, cool.
Knock it out, dude.
So I don't want it to sound like that. What I object to is the idea of, I only want 2-channel stereo, so now I'm part of an exclusive group. That's
right. You should really, if they really want to be exclusive, they should go back to mono.
Right.
That'll really.
Some
and they have. I've seen
there's that dude who's like, reel-to-reel tape is the only source worth a damn. So
even though you take it from a different source and record it on reel-to-reel, somehow playing it back on reel-to-reel makes it better. You are a crazy person. So it's really an exclusionary thing, and I sense
that's where the word audiophile got a bad connotation, was from this exclusionary attitude. That's where it came from.
That's right. And this sort of it really comes down to this offhanded condensation. I would say condensation, condescension.
Right.
When somebody says, "I bought Bose speakers," you go, "Oh, you did? Why?" Or, "Oh," and you just leave it at that. That's not where we are. Okay, that's not where we are. People buy Bose headphones all the time. People buy.
The headphones are actually good. So.
The headphones are fine. People buy Beats by Dr. Dre all the time. I had a friend of mine. He's like, my son got these Beats from Dr. Dre. I don't know where he got them from. Well, dude, he stole them probably. I mean, honestly, he can't afford them. He stole them. He's like, I don't think he said his friends gave them to him. I'm like, he stole those speakers. Like he stole his headphones for sure. He goes, oh, whatever, whatever. He really likes them. I'm like, that's great. He likes them. Didn't say a word about it. 2 months later, he comes back, goes, hey, the other day I listened to those Beats headphones that my son has. They sound terrible. I'm like, I know. He goes, why'd you say anything? I'm like, why would I? What possible benefit is it for me to denigrate something that you own, or your son has procured through whatever nefarious means? What possible benefit is it for me to say something about that? I have friends who have Bose speakers right in their house right now. The only thing I've ever said to them, because they're the weird sideways bookshelves with the angled tweeters.
Yeah, like were the 901s.
They were kind of like 901s, but they're the younger versions or the lower numbered version.
Like the 301s or the 201s.
Yeah. And I said, the only thing I said was like, if you switch the speakers so that the tweeters are pointing towards you and not pointing towards the side walls, might dialogue might get a little clearer. He goes, oh, well, the guy told me they're supposed to bounce off the wall. I'm like,
which is true. That's what they say.
I know. I said, I know, but I'm just saying. He goes, oh, okay. He never did it, and I never said another word about it. I try to help a guy out. It's fine. We're not exclusionary here. We're helpful. And if you think we're being exclusionary, you need to let us know so we can stop and apologize. But seriously, Stereophile is stupid. Jim has decided to simplify his complicated HDMI switching problem. Ooh, that's what we talked about last week. By like we suggested, and has sold his Marantz SR7008 to get a new receiver with HDMI 2.0A and HDCP 2.2. Now that HDMI 2.1 is apparently on the horizon. Gosh. Jim says he'll likely get the Denon AVRX 3300W, but he's confused about how feeding the LG OLED via Zone 2 with the main HDMI output going to the old projector will solve the problem like we said. It was his understanding that the Zone 2 HDMI output was for video, with the audio output being either pre-outs or second set of speaker post. Is this not right? He obviously doesn't need audio going to the projector, and he does want to be able to use the TV speakers. So how will this work? Also, is the Zone 2 output 2-channel only, and will this be a problem? No. Okay, first of all, the HDMI outputs, they always have the audio. I mean, I don't know in recent memory that you could just get video. I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible, but why would you limit it?
Yeah, with the HDMI outputs, what comes in via HDMI goes out via HDMI. Yeah. Now, that actually is potentially a bit of a problem if he's sending full lossless audio from his Blu-ray player, say, or his Ultra HD Blu-ray player, because I don't believe the LG TV can decode, say, Dolby True HD or DTS HD Master Audio. But Jim last week said previously that he doesn't really care that much about the lossless audio. He just wants it all to work. Yeah. So as long as you tell all of your sources to send vanilla Dolby Digital 5.1, so they're sending Dolby Digital 5.1 via HDMI to your now Denon receiver, that same Dolby Digital 5.1 will get sent out of the Zone 2 HDMI output, and your LG can decode that just fine. Yeah. So you don't need a separate audio connection. And where this comes up is we often talk about how Zone 2 outputs need the source to be stereo only. That is when you're using the Zone 2 pre-outs on the back of the receiver. But that's not what we're doing here. Here we're using the Zone 2 HDMI output. And that is just whatever comes in via HDMI goes back out. So that's how.
And the reason this is cost. Okay. So when you're taking the analog signal that's coming in, you have the option of converting all of that to HDMI, to digital, with a analog to digital converter. That costs money. Okay. Also, if you take a digital signals coming in and you want it to go out the analog inputs, you need a digital to analog converter. Now, that's where we run into problems here. First of all, anything that comes in over HDMI is not getting converted to analog. No way. Not the video signal.
Some AV receivers let you do it, not all. I can't remember if the 3300W does or not, but in Jim's case, it doesn't really matter, so I won't get too deep into that.
Most of them will not, and there's lots of times where any digital signal that comes in uh, will not be converted to analog to go out zone 2 or whatever it is. But that's not what the case here, so you don't have to worry about that because we're using HDMI and it's fine.
Yeah. And the reason we were saying to connect the OLED to the zone 2 is because we're concerned because he has this one 4K source, 4K display, which is OLED, and a 1080p display, which is his older projector. And we're concerned that even though you might have the OLED, powered down in standby mode, that your sources might still recognize there's a 4K TV somewhere in this signal chain.
That's what we're worried about. Yeah.
That's what we're worried about. So by connecting it to Zone 2, you can independently power Zone 2 completely off in the AV receiver. It's, 2 button presses to do that. That way, you're sure that your sources, when you want to use your projector, are not going to see this 4K TV sitting idle in standby somehow at the other end of the connection. They're going to be like, I only see one display. That's the 1080p projector, and hopefully that'll
all
work.
of this would be much easier if you get a Harmony remote.
That's right.
A lot easier. Bob, this is from the Philippines. So Bob has been assembling his home theater components, his LG OLED, his Denon receiver, his SVS Ultra speakers, and Blue Jeans cables. He was waiting for the Oppo to release the specs of their UDP 205 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and now they have, period. Yeah. But it's over twice the price of the UDP 203. So, in comparing the 203 and 205, is there any truly compelling reason to go for the much more expensive 205?
No.
Not unless no. I mean, there's a couple of caveats that we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast. The answer is no. If you have to ask the question, the answer is no. If you have the kind of system that needs the analog outputs of this thing, that's why you got to it in the first place. That's what you were looking for in the first place. If you're not looking for it, you're going to be connected via HDMI. It will make absolutely no difference.
That's right. Yeah. If your connection is HDMI for both video and audio, there is no reason to get the 205. The only reason to get the 205 potentially, and even then I question it highly, is if you are dead set on using analog audio connections. Now, I'm pretty sure he wants to do Atmos, so that's not happening. You're using HDMI for audio, so.
Yeah.
Stick with the 203.
You absolutely have to. So where Bob is living, authentic Blu-ray discs are difficult to find and purchase. Yeah, dude. When I was in Turkey, it was the same way. Yeah. In Turkey, like I would go to people's houses, they would have stacks of pirated like Xbox games or whatever they were. And it wasn't Xbox, it was before Xbox, I think. And I was just like, how do you have so many games? He's like, they're like $1. Just buy them on the street. They're anywhere. If they don't work, you throw them away. I'm like, really? Why do you do a pirate? He goes, where am I supposed to buy the real ones?
Yeah.
I'm like, Amazon? He goes, shut up. So anyways, the ones that are available can be a mix of region A and region B. So he wants a region-free Blu-ray player. Oppo players are not sold in the Philippines, so he would have to import one from the States. He's seen unlocked multi-region Oppo players being sold online. Would these work for him? Would a player from the US that has been modified to be multi-region work properly for him for both region A and region B Blu-rays?
Yeah. Now, so first of all, Ultra HD Blu-rays don't have regions, which is like, yay, they finally made a region-free format. So Ultra HD Blu-rays, no worries. Blu-rays have the 3 different regions, A, B, and C, and DVDs have 9 different regions, I think DVDs
it's ridiculous. Yeah, there's a whole bunch,
Oppo is the, best choice for region-free because they can actually do, modifications that work properly. Plus, the Oppo players are voltage agnostic. They don't care whether it's 110 volt or 220 volt. And they can do NTSC to PAL and PAL to NTSC conversion, which is important because sometimes you're getting one format or the other. So they're set up well. And yeah, you can definitely get region free. They have modified UDP 203s. So one place in particular, which is 220 Electronics, they sell that region-free modified 203 for $700, which of course is more than the $550 of the retail price of the 203 that is not region-free. But yeah, this lets you play any region. For DVDs, it switches regions automatically. For Blu-rays, you actually have to press a button to switch regions, but you can do that as many times as you want and switch to whatever region you're using. So that seems like the solution.
Yeah, it used to be a button press combination
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
switch regions on like their DVD players back in the day. I know
yeah.
that's what I did. But yeah,
Yeah,
Oppo.
he asked about the hardware versus software solution, but with the modern one, it's a modified player, so
Okay.
that's the way.
Yeah, and honestly, since Oppo is such a small company, they're not going to make region specific players. They're going to make one that they can modify to
Mm.
depending on where they're selling it to. So yeah, this makes perfect sense, and that's what I would do too. So he says since Blu-ray discs are in limited supply, he also wants the Oppo for playing various files from a USB hard drive, and he'd like to plug his cable box in the Oppo so that the Oppo can upscale the image to 4K.
Hmm.
Will the 205 do this any better than the 203? And
No.
will either of the Oppo players help produce a better image on this 4K OLED from these lower quality sources? Well,
Theoretically.
theoretically, yeah. The 203, the 205 only upgrades the analog audio outputs or includes them and then makes them the best.
And
Um,
supposedly the headphone output too, but neither of those is video. So
yeah, no, so that won't make any difference for you. And will these help produce a better quality image on his 4K OLED from these lower quality sources? The answer is probably,
yeah, for
theoretically.
DVDs they definitely do.
We know that because we can do the test. We know they'll pass all the tests,
Hmm. Hmm.
of the different cadences and
And most TVs
moire and all
don't.
that stuff.
So
Yeah. So chances are it will help. Will it take something that is in VHS quality and make it look crisp and clean on a 4K display?
right,
The answer is no. It cannot create pixels that don't
nothing can.
exist.
Yeah.
Nothing will make it look that good, no matter what you saw in Minority Report. As they zoomed in and zoomed in and zoomed in, and then put a filter over, and all of a sudden the license plate shows up. Doesn't happen. All right, it's only on CSI in Miami. In real life, you can't make pixels appear. So, but it can make it look as good as it possibly can, and the Oppo should have, if not, I mean, it's not professional quality, but it's going to be probably some of the best video scaling that you're going to find
Right.
outside of a standalone device.
Yep. The Region 3 203 is where you want to go.
I believe that is the truth. Brian, or better known as Brain the Vampire, which I still don't remember saying any of those words, so I think he made it up. First, some defense of keeping his AV vendor. I think I said you should fire him, so this is on me. The vendor is associated with the builder, so if he wants any work done before the construction is complete, he has to use them. That sucks. But yeah, I feel you. If he hires his own AV installer, he'd have to come up. He'd have to open up walls after the build is complete, which is inconvenient and more costly. Since having a set of speakers run to the master bedroom on the second floor, in addition to the theater stuff, it seems best to stick with them and just deal with the bad advice. As long as you don't take it, you can deal with it.
Right. Yes. Yeah. As long as you can get what you want, which, God, why wouldn't they? But yeah. Okay. There's an explanation.
Okay. About the amplifiers, we suggested both the monolith and the Emotiva seem nice, but he's noticed the monolith is listed as Class AB, and the XBA Gen 3 is listed as Class H. What's the difference? Or will it have any effect on the sound that he might notice?
The power supply.
Right. And to answer the second part of that question, probably not.
No.
I don't think so. Highly unlikely. So it's just a different amplifier topology. Class AB is very typical. We talked about it a number of times in this podcast. The Class H is another switching amp, right, with a different power supply.
Well,
is that right?
So I mean, to be clear, both of them are Class AB amplifiers, but the one that's called Class AB just has a regular linear power supply, and the one that's called Class H has basically a constantly variable power supply. So normally you have like a switching power supply that has different voltage rails. So as you need more power, it can switch to a higher voltage rail on the fly. Class H sort of like continuously sweeps up and down as necessary. So yeah, that's it. The power supply is different, but the amplifier modules themselves are both Class AB.
I wouldn't. Both of these amplifiers are going to be fantastic. So, aesthetically, that's a good way to choose, I suppose.
Yeah.
They're going to be fine with whichever one.
Yeah, the Emotiva is $100 more than the monolith, so it's not a gigantic gap in price either.
All right, so you checked out the Martin Logan Electro Motion series that Rob suggested, and since that's the series, since that's a series of names, there are two tower models in that lineup: the ESL and the ESLX. The ESLX has a slightly larger electrostatic panel, 40 inches tall versus 34 inches tall, and it uses two 8-inch drivers versus one 8-inch driver. So, given his intention to buy an SVS SB16 Ultra subwoofer, how much use will he be getting out of those 8-inch drivers? And is there a clear choice between the ESL and the more expensive ESL X in this situation? How big is this room again? I remember it being small. I remember the
Well,
space
no,
being
no, no.
small.
I mean, he's in a great room that's
Yeah,
completely open to everything. The living room section is about 15 feet wide.
right.
So his distance from eyes to
The
screen is
speakers.
somewhere around maybe 13 feet, 12 or
Yeah.
13 feet. Um, yeah, this is a bit tricky. First of all, you will definitely be making use of those 8-inch drivers. They cross over. I think one of them crosses over a little bit lower than the other. The one with the larger electrostatic panel plays
Right,
down to
sure.
about
Yeah.
400 or 450 hertz, and then the 8-inch drivers take over, whereas the other one I think plays down to 500 hertz, or it's something along those lines. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of from 500 hertz down to where your subwoofer takes over that's being handled by that 8-inch or dual 8-inch drivers. So they're definitely in use. And given how much space he has, I mean, in general, the larger electrostatic panels are that little bit more resolving, right?
Yeah.
Because
I don't
yeah, but
know.
it's a significant amount of money.
I'm
Cost.
worried yeah, and this is where it comes into, because I didn't look at the actual price, but I'm looking at the words Martin Logan and
Yeah, it's about
bigger
3,000 a
panel.
pair versus about 5,000 a pair.
Yeah, it's very hard for me to justify the extra $2,000, but
Yeah.
these are the explanations for why the bonuses. Okay, first of all, larger panel just in general is going to be a better
Yeah.
electrostatic experience. It's going to have it's going to be a little bit louder. It's going to be able to play a little bit lower. It's going to be like Rob said, a little bit more resolving.
Yeah.
The extra woofer means that you're going to have a little bit more bass in that lower mid range as we're getting down into the subwoofer. It's going to be able to cross over easier if bass is being swallowed up into your room because of the size. It's going to be able to play a little bit louder and keep up. Yes, you are going to be using your your whatever it is. That's the SB16 Ultra. Yes, you will have fantastic bass. It's just that one crossover region there. If it
Yeah.
were me,
I hate how
it's a
much
hard
money
one.
we're asking him to spend.
It's
I
such a hard one.
hate
If
it.
it were me, I'm thinking, I don't know. Okay, let me put it to you this way. In my price range when I was buying, I'm going to keep coming back to this bicycle analogy for this entire podcast. I'm sorry, I have to. It's just the thing I bought. When I was making the decision on which bike to buy, there was one I liked because of the looks, one I didn't like at all, and one that I felt was a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I didn't think it was anything. It might have been a tiny bit more comfortable, which I'm now thinking was something I should have. After my current experience with having a hard time sitting down for 2 hours at a time, is now something I should have thought more carefully about. Might have been slightly more comfortable than the bike other bike, but there was a $100 difference between the two, which is a significant amount of money at the price point. I'm not looking at the $4,000 bikes. I'm looking at much less than that. It's a significant amount of money. We're
Yeah.
talking like a quarter almost, maybe a little bit less than a quarter of the total price of the bike. And my wife thought I was going to go with the more expensive one because I usually do. I mean, that's usually what I do. But I called her and told her I was going with the other one, the cheaper one. And she said, why? I said, there's probably a performance difference that is probably non-zero. It may even be worth the extra money. I don't know that in my current state of infancy, of ignorance about how these things work, that I will ever know that difference or ever realize that or understand that difference. Therefore, if I never buy another bike, I will never know what I was missing.
Yep.
But if I do buy another bike, I am not going to buy that other bike that costs $100 more.
Right.
I'm going to buy something that costs a lot more than that.
Yeah, way more. Yeah.
So in your situation, do I think there will be a performance benefit of giving the larger speaker? I think the answer is yes. Do I think it's worth an additional 2/3 the cost of the speaker?
Yeah.
The answer is probably no, to be honest with you. It really is. And it's hard for me to say that because I think the performance difference would be real. I think if you A/B them, you would hear it. but in the end, I don't know if it'd be worth $2,000, and I think the not
Yeah.
knowing would make it okay. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And by the way, both of these, they dropped down to 1.6 ohms at one point. So that amplifier is a good purchase.
Yeah.
I no longer feel the least bit guilty about suggesting you get that, because AV receivers are going to struggle with 1.6 ohms, whereas the monolith will not, and the Emotiva won't either. So yeah, I completely agree. If money were not a consideration, I would say there's an argument to be made for going for the larger ESL-X. I don't think it's worthless in your situation. I
No.
think there is some value to be had there. But if the money is an object, I don't think you're going to be listening to the regular ESL, the smaller one, and be going, oh, I'm definitely missing something. It's not like
Yeah.
that.
I think you're going to be sitting
Yeah.
like, if you were sitting like 3 more feet away from these speakers, I think I'd push you in that direction. If you were sitting like, 16, 18 feet away, I'd be like, okay,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go bigger.
gotta go bigger.
Yep.
But you're not. I don't think you
There you
will
go.
be.
That's as helpful as we're going to be on that one, man. Oh, jeez.
Sorry, dude. I'm trying to save you money,
Other
to be
people's
honest with you.
monies. I know.
I know. Can we answer this next one quickly?
Absolutely. It's up to you. I'll go keep going as long as you're able to.
I am not able to. I'm tired. I'm passing out here, but we'll go on. Abhue on Facebook. Abhue. I may be saying that right or not. I don't know. We'll find out. What makes Ultra HD Blu-ray discs different than Blu-ray discs? Do they use a new laser, or are they just Blu-ray discs with additional layers? They definitely use a new laser. And they don't have additional layers.
Do they use a new laser? I don't know if they
I
do.
thought they did. I thought they did. I thought the laser was slightly different.
I don't think so. I mean, they're essentially the BDXL discs. So regular Blu-rays have 25 gigabytes per layer and a maximum
Right.
of 2 layers. So either 25 gigs on a single layer or 50 gigs on a dual layer. Ultra HD Blu-ray discs put 33 gigabytes per layer.
Right.
So you can have
Yeah, so it's tighter.
yeah. So they just go more to the edges.
No, really?
Yeah, that's kind of all they did on them. So they're either dual layer, meaning 66, or triple layer, meaning 99,
Right.
which they call a 100 gigabyte disc. So physically, they are different in that one is 25 gigabytes per layer, one is 33, but they do that just by going more to the edges. As far as I know, the laser, I mean, if it changed very slightly. It's still a blue laser.
Yeah, but I mean, it must be somewhat different because it's got to read.
I don't know, because I mean,
finer.
people are able to physically read Ultra HD Blu-ray discs with BDXL PC drives. Doesn't
That's
mean
cool.
anything will actually play, but they can physically read the data on them.
Hmm.
So, what was different was the focusing, because a regular Blu-ray drive can only focus on either one layer or the second layer. It can't
Right,
focus on a third or fourth layer like BDXL can. But BDXL can focus on
So
three
the
or
laser's
four
probably
layers.
the same. It's just the different.
Yeah, the laser's the
different-
same, but the lens
Yeah.
structure is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lens structure for the focusing is different. Outside of that, it's different formats that are stored on the disc. So Blu-ray is H.264. Ultra HD Blu-ray is H.265, also called HEVC. So it's a different codec that's on there.
Right.
And then, of course, what's in that format is different. It's 10-bit instead of 8-bit. It's got high dynamic range. It's got the higher resolution. But yeah, the physical discs themselves, not tremendously different. Yeah.
So lastly, ask, are there any AV receivers that can process both front heights and surround back speakers simultaneously? And if so, would that be 9.1.4? Well, wait a second.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit confused on this. And
Yeah,
that's
I am too.
exactly how he worded it. So I'm just going to go exactly how
I know,
he
I know.
worded
Because
it.
I read this question when it came in. I was like, that's what my home theater does. I've got height speakers and I've got surround back speakers.
Right.
Okay. So that's 7.1.2.
1.2. Yeah.
So what it is. So
Yeah.
are you saying, can they do height, surround backs, and then 2 additional Atmos speakers?
Right.
Or 4 additional Atmos speakers? And the answer to that question is no. Because front height speakers end up being an Atmos speaker. One of the
Yeah, that's
point
right.
fours. And we can't, so it would end up being 7.1.6 if what we're thinking you're saying is what you're saying, which is 7.1 setup with front heights, top middles, and top backs, or something like that.
Right.
Which can't be done right now. I mean, unless you have a turn off.
That's right. Or some of the other, like a Steinway Langdorf can do it. And
Yeah.
Datasat has one that can do it, but these are all over $10,000, or actually well over $10,000. So yeah, as far as regular mainstream AV receivers, what several of them can do is your 7 traditional speakers and 4 overhead speakers, 2 of which could be front heights. They absolutely could be. So you could have front heights and top middles, or front heights and top rears, or front heights and rear heights. So in that sense, you can absolutely do surround backs and front heights at the same time. Plenty of receivers can do that. Yeah, to get to 9.1.4, that would be adding front wides. So there aren't any mainstream receivers that can do 9.1.4. They can do 9.1.2. Yeah. There are quite a few that can do that. Only older ones, because none of the new ones do front wides anymore. But yeah, so the first number in this triple number thing is referring to how many speakers are at ear level. So the traditional is 7. 9 would add front wides. Then you have the next number, which is the number of subwoofers, and then the last number, which is the number of overhead speakers. Front heights are one option for those overhead speakers.
Yeah. Right, because what you're describing, what you're saying is front heights, right? Was it front heights, surround backs?
I'm guessing he's looking at a lot of
that's been around forever.
Yeah, I'm guessing he's looking at a lot of 7-channel receivers. Yeah. Like let's say the X3300W, right? That one maxes out at 7 speakers, so you could do 5.1.2, which would be 5 traditional speakers plus front heights could be the option, or you can set it up as 7.2, which would mean you have surround backs, but now you don't have front heights. So there's a ton of receivers that only do 7 speakers maximum. So maybe that's what he was asking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So mine only does 7, but you can add an amp to do the other 2.
To do 9. So in effect, your receiver can process 9 speakers. 9. It can power 7, but it can process 9. But yeah, there's a lot of receivers.
X4000. I mean, that's like 3 years old.
Yeah. There's several receivers that can process 9 or 11 speakers. There's several that can do that, but they are the higher end models for sure.
Right. Carrie saw a post from a filmmaker that was inspired by Samsung's HDR 10 Plus format announcement. Right. The filmmaker's initial reaction is that HDR is essentially just another way to, more than likely, screw up the director's intent, and that while a system like Dolby Vision can help with this controlled metadata, he doesn't believe TV manufacturers will be able to resist the urge using the brighter panels to HDRify all content to make everything brighter, bluer, and smoother. The filmmaker seems to mostly believe that there's no lack of dynamic range in existing filmmaking, and that brighter isn't better. And that brighter is better isn't true. So do we have any thoughts on this rant? I think he's got a point.
Yeah, I see where he's coming from for sure.
On some level. I mean, because if you look at TVs now, we still have frame interpolation, we still have smoothing, we still have all these other things.
And the out-of-the-box picture mode is rarely the most accurate mode when it comes to colors and contrast and all that.
And to think that they're not going to have some artificial HDR crap on their...
Oh, they already do. They have the SDR to HDR conversion thingy in there, for sure.
There's certainly... There would be no reason from their end not to include such a thing. Why are they going to include it? Why wouldn't they? Mm-hmm. Anything they can include that would make somebody go, this one must be better because of this thing that they got and it doesn't cost them that much extra money, they're going to do. Okay? So he's right on that. But getting past all that, all that stuff is usually defeatable and should be, and I dare say will be always defeatable, and so that we can have true HDR content that was filmed in that way, and we see what was filmed as intended. There's no reason to think that it's going to be foisted upon us by the TV manufacturers and that we're going to be subjected to it against our wills. Not only that, this whole idea that there's no lack of dynamic range in existing filmmaking is a get off my lawn rant that needs to just die. It happens every time a new technology comes out. People were complaining about I said this on the podcast before, people who did makeup, people who were doing sets were complaining that HG made some of their tricks not work anymore. You can't just put some random crap in the background and because it'll be blurry, people won't know what it is. I mean, one of the tricks when you're on stage, when you're supposed to be quietly, people are supposed to be talking and then somebody steps forward to do a monologue.
Sure.
When people are in the back, they say rutabaga to each other over and over again.
That's right.
Because when you say rutabaga, your lips make this sound that everybody's like, I'm not sound, but this motion that is not easily read by those that are looking at you. It doesn't immediately. It's not like you're going to distract the people who are off stage, the people in the audience. They're going to distract them by saying, "Oh, they're talking about what they're going to be doing in the next, scene or something like that." Rutabaga just comes out looking really weird, and people can't read your lips. Therefore, they focus on the person they can hear, which is the one person who's actually talking. So these tricks that HD supposedly ruined, amazingly enough, we still have TV and it still looks pretty good. So this is just another one of those rants. Oh, HDR, we don't need any more colors. We got all the colors we need. I got my 8-color crayon box. I'm good. Who needs 10-bit color? Who needs 12-bit color? I got 8-bit. I'm good.
Yeah, my basic feeling on this is that anyone who cared enough and took the time to get an accurate standard dynamic range image, and that's a lot of the people who listen to this podcast, but it's not most people overall, but anyone who did will continue to care enough to get an accurate HDR image, right? I agree. It is one more thing that can be messed about with. It is one more way to move away from the director or the filmmaker's intent. I agree with that. That's true. It's one more way that a lot of people will buy a new TV, take it out of the box, leave it in the default settings, and be seeing an even less accurate image. Right? I agree with that. But I don't agree with that there's no way to expand this. Like the whole idea that because HDR is there, every director is going to be forced to use all of it, all the way up to 10,000 nits. Like, no, you have a complete choice in how much dynamic range you choose to include in any image, right? And when the metadata is there and properly encoded, that's what you see, as long as you set up your TV to respond correctly to the metadata.
Yeah.
So, I agree. It is one more thing that can be screwed up. It's one more thing that in the default settings out of the box probably will be screwed up. But for the people who cared enough to set up SDR, they'll set up HDR correctly as well.
All right, it's going to be it for tonight. We're going to say to Will and Carl and Justin and scrolling and Wesley, and I can't believe we still have this many people in that. Dave and Matthew.
That's it.
Is that it? That we will see you next week.
Yes, we will.
Okay. If your name was not mentioned as one of the questions that we will be answering next week, and you sent your question before Monday, April 24th, then send it to us again just in case. Okay, because we answer all questions. Again, we want to thank our listeners of the week, Nate and Matt. They went to www.avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and gave us a PayPal donation that we will use to pay for our hosting fees and all that. So thank you, Nate. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, Nate, Matt, thank you both so much for those donations. We appreciate it.
If you want your answer, I'm not going to get that out, am I? If you want your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/AVRant Podcast. YouTube.com/C/AVRant. Going to contact us directly. It's Rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @FirstReflect. Mine is Tom@avrant.com, and my Twitter is @avrant_Tom. You can contact our producer as well. His name is Austin. Austin's got a Twitter handle @AustinPond, TENPOND. He's does all of our movie stuff and all of that. For all the Twitter, all the YouTube things are because of him. He also has his own podcast, the We Watch Movies podcast. It's a podcast about I wrote a list.
Cheat sheet. We watch movies. Clearly, it's about.
It's clearly about Bing, the web, the search engine Bing.
Yeah.
They've done some tests and they have many suggestions on how to use it best. Though I think their first episode summed it up best is that you go to the homepage of Bing and you type in Google, and then you go from there.
Nice.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.